those key players, whether it's an NVIDIA, a Broadcom, Microsoft, Amazon, or others. We still think those should be core holdings, but don't disregard the value opportunities elsewhere.
So where do you see the biggest value opportunities?
Look across sectors. I mean, industrials is one place to look where AI is being adopted, some in very obvious ways. Companies really point that out. Other companies will use it for their back office to make things more efficient. Also to develop new products, whether that's an Emerson, an Eaton, a Honeywell, or a Caterpillar. They're all using AI. And that's not the only reason to own them, obviously. I mean, these are solid companies with strong end market demand. We're seeing a recovery in the industrial space. We think that's likely to continue.
All right, Joanne, you're going to stick with us here for the opening bell. Joanne Feeney is going to tell us what her barbell strategy is. Let's get a check on futures ahead of that open. Right now, we're looking at 0.5% gains after an all-time high yesterday at the close. 65.12 was the level, which is why a 64.50 target doesn't really look that aggressive. The NASDAQ right now at over 24,000, over a 0.5% gain there as well. And interestingly, the small caps not doing quite as well, up only 0.2% at 23.89 in the Russell 2000. Of course, they have been outperforming of late, and they do need a rate cut, maybe more than the bigger cap indexes. We will be back in just 30 seconds with the opening bell on the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange. This is Bloomberg Open Interest.
Hello, my name is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and we are live streaming on Rumble, YouTube, and my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. These videos are for free, so you can get a news stream, but also my perspective on the news. And I also tell you how to improve your health and wellness and prepare for the fall and winter season. It's something that you need to pay attention to. You're going to need to prepare. Now, we are doing this live stream on September 10th. I have many channels. Please subscribe to all the channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. I also have 2 channels on X and 1 channel on GETTR. You can also help support the work by sharing the links, asking your social media to follow me. If you like the content and you want to support the work, please donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. You can also be a paid member to my Patreon channel and be a paid member to my Substack. The links are in the description of this video, so please join. Now, all the videos I do are for free, so it's the ones that would like to support that helps to grow the channel. I greatly appreciate it. And take a look at the great products that I offer. I have ebooks, supplements, and course material on immunology and pulmonology, so you can learn about those subject matters. You get lots of PDFs, you get lots of videos, so take a look at that. Course material, it's really informative. Now, in terms of the supplements, I'm going to tell you throughout the show how to stack them to get the most bang for your buck. And if you do what I tell you to do, you're going to boost up your immune system and slow down the aging process. It works. It's something I've been doing for a very long time, and I'm in my 50s. The market just opened up, so let's take a look at what the the market is doing at this moment. The S&P 500 is at 6,544. The VIX is trading at 1466. The euro is trading at 117. Oil is trading at $63 a barrel. BITO, which is the ETF for Bitcoin, is trading at 1960. Bitcoin's trading at 114,000. The Japanese yen is trading at 147, and natural gas is trading at 3.042. In terms of the equity market, I have a target of 6,800 to 7,000 by year end. We're already trading above 6,500. Now, 6,500 is a resistance level that seems to start as we approach the Fed making their announcement of cutting rates. We're breaking through that and moving towards a new resistance level. That resistance level is going to be, that next resistance level is going to be about 6,700, all right? Maybe about 6,725. And then if we continue to pass through the 6,500 mark, then the 6,500 mark is going to be a support level. I think that's going to happen within this week. So we're going to be moving those trading ranges now to 6,500 to approximately 6,700. With that, let's listen into Bloomberg.
The biggest slice of the pie, but it's not growing as much as Eli Lilly. Let's bring back Advisors Capital Portfolio Manager and Partner Joanne Feeney. And Joanne, we were talking about this growth value barbell strategy that you're employing. Where do you see the growth side that you don't already own?
Well, Matt, it's going to depend on the strategy, whether it's our growth strategy, our SMID strategy, or some of our balance strategies, the kind of mix we want to hold. The growth right now that is most obvious is in that infrastructure build, most recently displayed by Oracle. Beyond that, you have to look at, I think, a number of factors that can drive growth. It's demographics in addition to AI, right? It's the continued demand for healthcare, whether it's medical devices, whether it's, services, for example. So there's a lot of places one can find growth, but it's essential to recognize that one needs other things in their portfolios, outside of the growth strategy itself. In a balanced strategy, you might want income. And so maybe you don't, emphasize growth as much there. You're looking for value, you're looking for strong dividend yields, well supported by free cash flow.
What about diversification? How key is that, Joanne? I guess it's tough if you're not investing at the index level, or do you pick stocks from different regions, different industries? How do you diversify?
Yeah, so we don't invest in the index for clients, but we definitely diversify. And you can get quite a lot of diversification into client portfolios by owning for them 40 or so stocks. And so we do look across sectors, and then within sectors, there's a lot of different industries within each sector. In healthcare, for example, medical devices, pharmaceuticals, laboratory equipment, these all offer a way to diversify. And again, then you get that mix of, how can you find value among these companies? And there's really plenty of value to be had out there.
Are there places that you want to stay away from? And we've talked about concentration risk in the Mag 7, and I'm sure that your clients already own those stocks, but is there something else that you'd like to avoid?
Well, we don't own all of the Mag 7. We are pretty judicious in which stocks we want to hold. Again, different portfolios own different strategy, different particular stocks. Things to avoid, I think, are things where you can't assess risk very well. And right now, we certainly face a lot of risk. The tariff situation, while it's understood mathematically that a tariff increase will cause a one-time increase in prices, as Powell said at Jackson Hole, it's a one-time increase, but it doesn't happen all at once. And so the tariff pass-through is going to be slow. We're seeing retail margins come down in the latest PPI report. So there are certain types of retailers we may not want to hold because these tariff increases, those price increases, are going to impinge upon budgets more severely over time. So the low-income consumer, we still see as particularly under threat. And that's an area, their demand is an area to avoid.
So the low-income consumer under threat. I wonder what you think about this GLP-1, not this specific story today, about the firings at Novo Nordisk, but the effects of it. For a while, we thought it was sort of the runner-up story to AI in terms of market impact. Has it worked out that way? What do you think about that in healthcare?
Well, I think the opportunities in that particular trade are pretty narrow, right? You only have a few companies to play with, and then there's the monitoring of the potential development of an oral drug that does the same thing. We know, unfortunately, that the oral delivery is far less efficacious in terms of the amount of drug you take to have the same effect. And so the thing to watch there is whether those oral drugs develop in a way that they become more efficacious without having more side effects. So right now it's a very narrow opportunity and one that has a lot of risks. As you can see, whenever you're in a two-horse race, it's just very it makes you very vulnerable as an investor unless you want to own both of the companies at this point.
Well, what do you think about first of all, do you, Joanne? And then what do you think about the rest of healthcare?
Yeah, we don't own those names. The rest of healthcare, we see a lot of opportunities, companies that are far more diversified than those two. Look at Bristol Myers, for example, trading at a very attractive multiple below 7 times forward earnings. Or Pfizer. These are companies that have some headwinds because of legacy drugs coming off of full patent protection, but they also have very deep pipelines, and they have the balance sheet to support the growth and development of those new drugs. And we're starting to see some good results. These are two very attractively priced stocks, by the way, with very nice dividend yields, which really help our clients that are looking for income.
All right, Joanne, great to get some time with you this morning. Joanne Feeney there of Advisors Capital Management talking to us about her strategy as we hit all-time highs on the market. Let's get a check right now on the S&P 500, trading at 65.48, so that's an intraday high, and obviously it would be a closing high as well. This is the move screen. You can see that after a strong open, we quickly dropped and are climbing again. The breadth is evenly split. We've got 249 stocks gaining, 248 stocks down right now, but you've got the half of the Mag 7 on the upside, half on the downside. NVIDIA right now up 3.5% after those Oracle earnings. So it can't be overstated how key that is to the gains on the S&P. Oracle itself up 35% this morning. On the downside, you have Apple. We saw it down 0.6% in the pre-market. It's now down almost 2% in the cash trade. So it looks like investors are disappointed with what they got yesterday from the iPhone 17, AirPods, and Apple Watch. Amazon also down 1.7%. Groups that are moving this morning, take a look at the split here. It's also pretty even with IT, with tech stocks. The top gainer, energy utilities also gaining, which is typically fairly defensive, although energy moving around because of geopolitical moves today. Consumer discretionary, the big loser, and that's what you would buy if you were really bullish this market. So it's interesting to see it on the downside. Comp services and healthcare, as well as consumer staples off as well. Coming up, analysts across Wall Street are raising their targets for Oracle following that blowout earnings report, and we'll bring you the details with Mandeep Singh of Bloomberg Intelligence. This is Open Interest.
All right, while they're on commercial break, I'm just going to do a quick plug for the products that I have in my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Another reminder, I have set up Substack. I've been posting on there. Please subscribe if you'd like to help support the work that I do. Again, all these videos I do are for free. I want to inform the public on how to improve their health, but also my opinion on what's going on in the financial markets and in other newsworthy events. Watch some of the other videos that I have published the last few days, especially on foreign policy and different types of warfare and weapons. I think it's very interesting, the perspective I have. So please pay attention to that. It's a longer series that I'm starting to develop on how biologics are going to affect foreign policy and how biologics can be used as tools to enhance the transhumanism movement, which I'm against. I'm against the transhuman movement. But biologics are going to be used for transhumanistic advancement. But how you can use biological warfare to actually fight the transhumanists. So it's an interesting concept here that I'm developing. in terms of biologics and foreign policy. So pay attention to that. Now, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great products that I offer. I have structural nanosilver soaps. You can get it in charcoal tea tree, in lemongrass, and also in peppermint and lavender. Very high quality soaps. So get a few bars for your household. Be prepared. Help with your health and wellness, and help support the work that I do. It's a win-win situation. You're getting healthier, you're getting very high quality products, and you're helping support the channel. So thank you very much for the ones that do purchase on a regular basis. I greatly appreciate it. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last, and use discount 5. I want you to use discount 5. It's all caps, discount 5, number 5, and you get $5 off any order. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Walk you through what you need to know to kickstart Europe's trading day. Live from our European headquarters, we bring you the day's top market moving stories, unmatched expert analysis, and on-the-ground reporting from across the continent. Tune in to Daybreak Europe, only on Bloomberg Television. Context changes everything.
Time now for our top calls. Some of the analyst action that's in focus for us this morning. First up, Evercore downgrading HP, Hewlett-Packard's in line, saying shares are now fairly valued in the wake of recent strength, and they are off on an up day. Next up, TD Cowen upgrading Nike to buy from a hold, pointing to strengthening margins and notable market share gains. Maybe it's about time if you're a shareholder. They're up 0.7% today. And finally, Bank of America upgrading Oracle to a buy after earnings blew out expectations, highlighting the company's impressive forecast and robust demand for AI-related products. Let's talk about that right now with Mandeep Singh from Bloomberg Intelligence. He runs tech coverage for that unit. He joins me here at the desk. And I thought it was interesting. In the write-up today, BN said Oracle's results stunned Wall Street. I mean, that's pretty strong language. And you can see by the game, 35%. What an incredible result.
Yeah, and look, the backlog, the number that they gave clearly suggests that when it comes to AI, there is some share shift going on in terms of training versus inferencing workloads. And Oracle is catering to both training and inferencing workloads, whereas the hyperscalers, especially Microsoft and Alphabet, they are focused more on inferencing workloads. So from that perspective, OpenAI will likely go to Oracle for training the next model, even though GPT-5 wasn't that big of a deal, but they will constantly improve their models, and they're going to Oracle for that capacity. And the longer term deals that they talked about will result in, almost a 14-fold increase in Oracle's infrastructure revenue over the next 4 years, which is huge. So to my mind, the GPU capacity right now is being allocated in a way where Oracle is a big beneficiary, to the extent that we almost always talked about 3 main hyperscalers. Oracle is definitely the 4th big hyperscaler. Probably it will take over one of these 3. Who knows? But that's what the forecast suggests.
So Microsoft, Google, and Amazon were previously the 3 main hyperscalers.
Yeah.
But in order to grow at this breakneck pace, they need a bigger share of Jensen Huang's NVIDIA chips. And if
Lambda, Crusoe. So in the cloud world, we just have 3 hyperscalers dominate everything. In the AI workload,
The yellow line is price. The white line, if we show it again, is the 12-month price target for analysts. And when
for the first time because of the GPU demand, it feels like that for Oracle. And clearly this is recurring revenue. Yes, there is a leasing component and backlog. It's a commitment, so companies can get out of that. But look, I mean, we're talking about a company that dominates the on-prem database world, and that is what they called out, that they will help a lot of those customers move from on-prem to cloud AI workloads through their infrastructure, which is why they have so much runway, because they do dominate that on-prem world.
we were talking about yesterday, Oracle shares like 40%. Right now they've doubled year to date. They're up 533% if you reinvested your dividends over the past 5 years. They're just crushing it. And I want to shout out also Brody Ford, the Bloomberg News reporter who wrote such a fantastic piece. He says that this forecast galvanizes hopes the post-ChatGPT global AI infrastructure build-out is accelerating. Yeah. It's hard to imagine accelerating from the pace where we're already sitting. All right, let's move on to Apple, because this is a stock that's down today, or at least it was down right at the open, and worse than the pre-market, actually. Yesterday they had these iPhone 17 releases, including the thinner one for just under $1,000 or at $1,000, and earbuds that can track your heartbeat. Sounded really cool, but analysts and investors really not impressed this morning.
I mean, with Apple, they have great specs with this new version. You have to ask yourself.
They have great specs with every version, dude. I saw, the thinner one that they said has a weaker camera, is still 48 megapixels.
Amazing. But then when it comes to AI use cases, I thought they showed a pretty cool demo around AirPods transcription. To me, that feels like, an incentive to upgrade my AirPods. Now, for the phone, even though they have great specs, I don't see what is possible, because right now all my AI use cases are driven off of apps, and the apps run on cloud. That's what Oracle said. They need more cloud capacity. So if everything is happening on the cloud, why do I need to upgrade my device? And so to me, the real upgrade incentive comes from things that run on device from an AI standpoint. They definitely have the chips and the features, but I just didn't see a cool demo that will make me feel like, oh, I need to upgrade to the new phone because it can run this use case on device. If it's app-based, it's happening on the cloud, which is what Oracle is saying. We need a lot more capacity.
Well, that's a problem not just for Apple, but for Dell and HP. And when my most used command is like, hey Siri, open ChatGPT, that's a problem.
That's a problem, yes. Whereas if I can say, hey Siri, do this on my phone, that's when I will upgrade, instead of just opening ChatGPT.
I wonder why Siri's not listening right now. Maybe I have her muted. All right, Mandeep, great to get you on the program. As usual, Mandeep Singh runs our tech coverage for us at Bloomberg Intelligence, talking about the explosion in Oracle shares today and NVIDIA.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great supplements that I offer. Before I talk about those supplements, I'm going to pivot after the commercial to Times Radio. They're talking about Putin's drones entering Poland, and then Poland shot them down. So is this going to escalate the war between Ukraine and Russia and get NATO involved? This is problematic. And remember what I was saying, as you start to hear tension arising politically and financially within Britain and in France, you're going to start seeing more conflict on the eastern side of Europe. We're starting to see it right now here. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics and the multivitamin. All right? The probiotics and the multivitamin. Very important to help with the foundation of the protocol. So the complete multivitamin has the multivitamins that you need for proper enzymatic activity. your enzymes have a three-dimensional shape, and these multivitamins they're cofactors for the proper shape of these enzymes to have a higher efficacy in terms of cellular processes. So these multivitamins will attach to the actual enzyme, change the shape so it will perform faster and more efficiently. So this is the reason why it's so important to take a multivitamin. This is easy digest, so take it every day. Make sure you get it for your protocol. It's the foundation. Then you also stack it with the probiotics that I have. Now, I have it in two different forms. I have it in the powdered form, which is the one that I prefer to take. And I also have it in the veggie cap form. I prefer to take the powders because I take a lot of different powders during my lunch, so it's just easier to mix them all. Some people don't do that, and they prefer the ease of just taking the veggie cap. So take the MB40 probiotic on my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, or the powdered version of the probiotic. And with a good probiotic, you're going to improve your gut biome. You're going to be able to absorb your nutrients easier. You're going to improve your gut immune system because the mucosal layer is going to increase. The concentrations of the microbiota will be proper, and you will have higher concentrations of IgA, which is an antibody. That will help with the immune system at the gut level. You'll also have better communication between your gut and your liver and your gut and your brain. So your liver will perform better. Your metabolism, creating bile, creating proteins, breaking down sugars, helping with cholesterol processing. Your liver does a lot of stuff, so you need a healthy liver, right? But it starts at the gut level. And you have a better communication between your brain and your gut. And that way, what happens is that you will be able to sleep better. You will have less brain fog. When you're sleeping better, you're consolidating your memory, you're detoxifying your central nervous system. You're going to be well rested. And you're going to notice even that your skin is improving with a good gut biome. So many health issues start at the gut level. So if you improve your gut biome by taking a high quality probiotic, then you are moving forward and having your body being at its best. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the probiotic, either in the powdered version or the MB40 veggie cap, and get the complete multivitamin. Stack them together, that's the foundation, and you build off of that. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. In addition, because we're moving into the fall and the winter season, take a look at those anti-Fauci boxes that I have and be prepared.
It doesn't matter what Russia intended to do. What matters is the effect, which is that the drones cross into Polish airspace. So same as in any war, what matters is the outcome. And that's why NATO leaders have shown such concern.
Poland says it downed Russian drones in its airspace. It's the first time the NATO country has directly engaged Russian assets in its own airspace since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. Times Radio's Louis Sykes is near the Polish border with Ukraine and sent us this voice note.
Several Russian drones crossing into Poland overnight, with many shot down by Polish air defences. Donald Tusk, the Prime Minister of Poland, is saying he was in contact with officials from NATO. They've put the military on alert and shortened the amount of time they can deploy reserves. Tusk is taking a clear but cautious position, saying that it could have been much more serious. There's no sign yet that anyone has been killed or major damage to Polish infrastructure or buildings. But one drone did land 5 kilometers away from a Polish military base near the Belarusian border. Of course, to some, this will remind some of the event in November 2022 when 2 men were killed by a downed Russian missile that had been intercepted over Ukraine and drifted into Poland. Certainly, the reaction among locals here is not significant. I mean, we are nowhere near where these drones came down, and that shows in their reaction. There was a national alert received by a lot of Polish people, some asking why these drones weren't shot down over Ukraine rather than Poland itself, but largely a sense of keep calm and carry on. We are close to the Ukrainian border, and the city of Lviv, which was hit, was likely the intended target of these attacks.
That was Louis Sykes, Times Radio's Louis Sykes, near the Polish border. Well, Elizabeth Broyes, Senior Fellow with the Atlantic Council's Transatlantic Security Initiative, and joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
What is the latest, as we understand it, about what has happened in Polish territory overnight?
So as your reporter said, the drones were shot down, but the latest is that officials, or I should say political leaders around the region, have expressed severe concern, but also sympathy with Poland, and that shows how seriously they take this. You wouldn't have presidents and prime ministers issuing statements if they didn't take it seriously, but they do, because this is really extremely careless act by Russia, even if Russia didn't intend to target Poland, which we don't think it is. It was extremely careless because it could have caused considerable harm.
Should we break this down a bit, because there's a lot of information there? Are you suggesting that Russia is going to say this was unintentional, that it was not a direct attack on Polish territory? Because it seems from the reporting, at least currently, Poland has interpreted this very differently. It closed 4 airports, including its main and largest airport, overnight, and seems to be suggesting that these are drone incursions, not an accidental straying into Polish territory.
So it was part of an attack on Ukraine, and as your reporter said, Lviv was targeted, which is a main city near the Polish border. So we have no idea whether Russia intended to strike Poland, but it was part of that attack on Ukraine. And I think most people's take, or most officials' interpretation, is that it was not intended as a direct attack on Poland, but it came as a sort of a byproduct of the attack on Ukraine. But that really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what Russia intended to do. What matters is the effect, which is that the drones cross into Polish airspace. So same as in any war, what matters is the outcome. And that's why NATO leaders have shown such concern. And these are not, so what we've seen in the past are Russian aircraft, for example, trespassing Estonian airspace, but they just trespass. They are not there to drop bombs or anything like it. It's a provocation. With this, the drones obviously could have caused harm if they had not been shot down. So that is the concern.
And we have seen a response from NATO. We had the UK Minister Josh McAllister on a short time ago saying that the UK was not involved in that response. But what do we expect now from NATO allies in terms of a sort of a direct response to Russia?
We have already seen the beginning, which are these statements by a number of leaders of a number of NATO member states, and what we will see is likely more concern expressed simply because there's no continuing danger at this point. The drones have been shot down, but we are likely to see more NATO vigilance along Poland's border with Ukraine, more statements reiterating that NATO will respond to any attack. And there isn't really very much NATO can do other than to warn Russia that attacking NATO territory, whether it's a drone a few kilometers from Poland's border with Ukraine, or whether it's a massive planned assault, anything in between those points is not going to be tolerated by NATO, and NATO will respond with all the tools available to it.
Yeah. Elizabeth Brough, Senior Fellow with the Atlantic Council's Transatlantic Security Initiative. Many thanks for joining us on the programme.
But we have all seen what Russia means by diplomacy. Putin refuses to meet President Zelensky. Last week, Russia launched the largest number of drones and ballistic missiles in a single attack. Yesterday, there was a missile attack on a village in Donetsk, targeting people waiting to pick up their pensions. More than 20 were killed. And just today, we have seen a reckless and unprecedented violation of Poland and Europe's airspace by more than 10 Russian Shahid drones. Europe stands in full solidarity with Poland. Putin's message is clear, and our response must be clear too. We need more pressure on Russia to come to the negotiation table. We need more sanctions. We are now working on the 19th package in coordination with partners. We're particularly looking at phasing out Russian fossil fuels faster. We're looking at the shadow fleet and at third countries. With the cash balances,
personally, I think that with Russia going over the airspace of Poland and not apologizing, and they did it on purpose, this should activate Article 5 of NATO. NATO needs to get more involved. And I have not been a proponent of activating NATO for this Ukrainian war until just now. Putin doesn't want to take the off-ramp. He thinks that Trump is not willing to truly support Ukraine and that NATO needs to be activated and it needs to now go into full war in Europe. I think this right here is the straw that broke the camel's back. Now, I personally think that the Europeans are going to be afraid and they're not going to do it. Because Putin thinks, okay, who are the major players in Europe? Britain, France, and Germany. And all three of them have a lot of debt, social unrest, and a weary population to actually conduct a war. They can't even finance a war. So Putin's playing, he's looking at this in a game theory point of view, that he could get away with it. And the only way to stop Putin now is to actually go to full war. NATO needs to be activated. Now, there's going to be a lot of people out there, especially with the America First movement, saying we don't need to be in Europe and blah, blah, blah. And, but when is Putin going to stop? When is Putin going to stop? All right, so let's I don't know if I'm not sure if he's talking yet. I was kind of hoping to listen in to Bannon's live show if he's started yet. I think he starts at 10. Let's take a look. But while we're waiting, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the magnesium and zinc. This will boost up your immune system and your brain function. Super important. You're going to know a lot of people within the next 5 years. About 30 to 40% of the people that you know that are 40 years of age or older probably are going to have early onset of dementia because of what we went through in 2020. So you better start preparing for that, and you better start boosting up that immune system for the fall and the winter, and take magnesium to help with your brain function. Super important. I'm telling you, it's going to happen. That's the next path. That's the next wave of aftershock that's from the 2020 incident. Vitamin C and magnesium boost up that immune system, help with your skin health and brain function. Take them together. Super important. And magnesium increases the efficacy of vitamin D3. And you're going to need that. Why? Because vitamin D3 gets rid of cells that need to go into apoptosis after an infection. Very important. Better start paying attention. Get the vitamin C and magnesium, and get the magnesium and zinc. Help with your brain function and help with your immune system, and help with the efficacy of vitamin D3. You're going to need it in the fall and the winter. Trust me. It's coming. All right, let's listen into Bannon. I don't play Bannon live on my show, but I think that we are moving into a new realm in the world, and also in domestic policy, but in the world in general, where we're now in a hot war. And you have debt that is happening all over the world. Canary in the coal mine with Britain and France. Putin's not taking the off-ramp. President Xi is signaling that he wants Taiwan. America is in debt. Got a lot of people in America that don't want to fight. It's America first, and they think that they're going to just be, insular with the oceans. But this world is so interconnected now, financially, and with hypersonic missile systems and ICBMs. You can't hide. You can't hide. So we're moving into a new era here, especially in biologics. We're moving in a new era. We need to start understanding the foreign policy of this, and we need to start understanding what is our military posturing, especially in the Pacific theater. Then you look at what's going on in Panama. Should the United States just take it? Or should the United States lease it? Should the United States just get preferential treatment in moving our ships in and out? And this debate, fascinating, this debate was going on during the Carter administration. And fast forward to 2025, and now we have a problem with Panama. So these things are happening all at once. Then you have artificial intelligence and drone warfare. Things are changing. Things are changing, and they're changing rapidly. So let's listen in to, I have no idea what he's going to be talking about. So let's just listen in really quickly. And then if it's related to geopolitical events, then we'll continue on listening. But I'm going to try to add in Bannon's live stream as part of the show to have an overall context of, like, we are in not just a Cold War 2.0, but we're in a hot war now.
From North Minneapolis, like I am, you didn't grow up playing basketball in the park where you heard gunshots and you had young teenage friends killed and you had to go to those wakes and those funerals. You didn't grow up like that, and you certainly don't live like that now. So I think again, after George Floyd, and I'm sorry to go on, Steve, but after George Floyd, there was supposed to be a conversation in this country about Black communities taking more responsibility for themselves and exercising what American fundamental ideas are, such as self-governance. You give up your right to self-govern. You forfeit the right to self-govern when you let the product of your community be this debauched, be this depraved, be this violent and demonic. So, and I, as a self-governing American patriot, we want people to self-govern, but you can forfeit that right, and that's what's happening across these cities. I'm like a third base coach telling a guy to come on home with when it comes to supporting Donald Trump and sending the National Guard all across the country. It's not tyranny. It'd be tyranny if there was no reason to send them across the country. Right now, the reasons are obvious in many Black communities. Van Jones and the rest of the liberal media are lying again. It's a problem.
The situation in the crime statistics, the gap in wages, the education, the education comprehension. I think a big part of that too is also flooding these schools where Black kids go and Hispanic kids go with the children are illegal aliens, so they got English as a second language. All the problems are personified in these big urban areas. Since you have the Van Joneses of the world, you call them the Black bourgeoisie, that is totally tied to the liberal media that kind of promotes them.
It's true.
What is, as a populist and a nationalist, and you're running again for the Senate in Minneapolis, you were the Republican candidate last time. And that's a city that's kind of example one of, taking, 50,000, 100,000 Somalians, right, over top of the Black community. What are the solutions here? If we got to start talking about problems, what are the solutions? What are you're a big Trump supporter. What are your solutions when you talk to the Black community?
Well, let's just be up front. This guy deserves a death penalty. Again, I'll say it again. We need harsher penalties, and for the time being, until we're able to take back our schools from the Marxists and communists and teach people some national honor, some sacred honor, and reprioritize real America education, American Christian-based.
This is what I mean by God, country, and family. Now, he puts it in the context of Christianity. It doesn't have to be Christianity, but the point here is that God, country, and family is a key component of a functioning society. Now, people have the right to vote, but that doesn't mean that they're educated enough to vote. Meaning, do they really understand the policies? Do they really understand the negative externalities of their actions? And like he said, if you can't self-govern, perhaps you forfeit the right to govern, and that the government has to come in and clean up the mess.
When are you going to start seeing politicians actually get elected to office? Black politicians that are populist nationalists like yourselves, and even some of them Christian nationalists, that confront, the political apparatus that is the Black Congressional Caucus, particularly redistricting. It seems like you're getting more radical voices from the Black community in Congress, at the state level, at the city level. Look at these cities; they're out of control. When are you going to see this actually translate to working class Blacks saying, "Hey, I can't do this anymore. Right? I'm a victim of all this. These politicians have sold me out. I've got no I need to look at other alternatives, sir."
Well, it's already begun. But again, and I think President Trump and the administration is focusing on the integrity of these elections, and that's going to be important as well. But look at Minneapolis, for example. The Republicans didn't even run a mayoral candidate against Omar Fonte and Jacob Fry because they assume we'll just lose. We will start to take this country back in the inner cities when the rest of the GOP and the NRSC and these rhino neocon Republican organizations take your lead and actually reach to these people. These people want to be saved. Look at the woman that the White House put out a video of her son was shot and killed at 23 years old, just going on a date, and he never came home. These people exist. We need to go into these communities and empower these people to run for office where they are.
Royce, where do people get you? You've got social media, you've got the show here in Rev, you've got a podcast that comes on a couple nights a week. Where do folks go to get your content?
RoyceWhite.us, that's the Senate website. You can go there and follow up with the campaign. And then, as you said, Real America's Voice, Saturday mornings before you in the War Room at the 8 a.m. hour Eastern. And I'm on all social medias. Thanks, Steve, for having me. I appreciate you, brother.
Are you going to take this? Are you going to be the nominee again? I want our audience to pile in on back in Royce White. Are you going to be the nominee again for the Republicans?
We'll see. They're running a Nikki Haley slate against me here in Minnesota on the Republican side. The MAGA movement will prevail. We know exactly who Nikki Haley is.
Royce, we've got about a minute. Are you a Christian nationalist?
Proudly. Absolutely. I'm a Catholic nationalist. Be more clear.
Royce White. Social media, where do people go on Twitter, GETTR, all of it to get you, sir?
Royce White, you can find me on every social media platform. I'm there, and I appreciate the time, Steve. Honestly, I hate to ramble on about it, but the Black community has to find some sacred honor, stop making excuses. It's not racist. I'm worried to go down.
It's about God, country, and family. You got to brush your teeth. You got to make your bed. You got to pull up your pants, and you got to work. And what I'm noticing in the inner cities is that a lot of young Black people fail to do that. Now, there are many that are, but there are too many that aren't. And just like the broken window theory, you get enough of broken windows and the society goes to hell. Well, same thing. You got enough Black males they're not pulling up their pants, and then they don't have proper etiquette, social etiquette, then don't be surprised that they're shitting on the MTA system, literally. They're stabbing whites. They're stealing from Foot Locker. But AOC thinks that they're stealing from bread. Well, you can't eat your shoe. So it's out of control. It's out of control. And people need to start pushing back, and people need to use conservatism. It's really about individualism versus collectivism. It's about liberals versus conservatives. Okay. With that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Myotrol. Myotrol is really important to take if you're 40 years of age or older. It's for males or females. It has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans. It'll help with the gene expression to build muscle and to maintain muscle. This will prevent atrophy, and this will allow you to have a better skeletal muscle structure. This is super important as part of an anti-aging process. When you get older, you have less energy, and you don't move around as much. And because of that, because of the lack of activity, you start to lose muscle fast. Just like when you were younger, but in the opposite, it was easy to gain muscle because you had youthful gene expression for gaining muscle. Well, when you get older, your genes start to methylate and it's harder to express. But if you take supplementation and you do exercises and you stay away from bad food and you clean up your environment, you detoxify your body, you're actually helping your body to get back to a moment in time where it was easier to actually express some of these genes. Right? There's lots of feedback loops in terms of this methylation process. So when you get older, you start to methylate genes and genes start to turn off or less expressed. Well, for the ones that are less expressed, you can actually have them acetylate and reduce the methylation and allow for more gene expression. That's what this does. Myotrol helps with the gene expression so you can build muscle. So that microenvironment that you're creating through that resistance training and working out is signaling to your body, hey, I need to build muscle. But the genes don't want to build the muscle because they're turned off because you're older. But the polyphenols, the lignans, the flavonoids, these help with that gene expression. So you're going to be able to build muscle faster. You're going to be able to maintain that muscle, and it helps with the mitochondrial health. So you have more ATP to help build and maintain that muscle. Super important. So if you do an anti-aging protocol early on in your life, less methylation takes place. And when you methylate less your genes, that means that you have more youthful gene expression compared to a peer group that's not doing an anti-aging protocol. This is why my protocol works. If you just follow my advice, you will slow down the aging process. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the Myotrol, and help with that gene expression so you're building muscle. All right, let's listen into Bloomberg while I'm watching what Dan is talking about.
Towards a more dovish stance, and so now we get to 9 votes. But those are also folks who are going to be a little bit more cautious about taking the elevator down on rates. They don't want to look like they're capitulating to political pressure.
Right.
So we could very easily get 9 votes. A very simple counting, 9 votes in favor of a 25 basis point cut, but probably not 50.
Thank you for the reminder that there are still several steps before Myron is, sitting on the FOMC board. However, it feels like it's a rubber stamp process from here on out. Just give us a reminder, when I said earlier that this is a short-term post, at some point he might get the full 14-year Fed governor's seat, right?
That's right. So it's sort of interesting that the terms of governorships last for 14 years, and if somebody leaves their post before,
right, I'm going to go to CNN here on Poland shooting down the Russian drones.
Download the app and get 50% off your first Wonder order with code 50Google. When you get in your car, you just need to put your location in the trip planner. It recommends where you need to stop, for how long, park, plug in, and breaking news out of Poland. The military there accusing Moscow of an act of aggression after Polish and NATO forces scrambled to shoot down Russian drones that violated its airspace. Prime Minister Donald Tusk has confirmed a military response operation is underway following multiple airspace violations. Polish and NATO jets were scrambled following reports from Ukraine's Air Force that Russian drones were headed towards the country's airspace. During the incident, Polish authorities shut down several major airports, including Warsaw International, and urged its citizens to stay indoors. The exact number of Russian drones over Poland remains unclear. We're joining us now for more is CNN military analyst and retired U.S. Air Force Colonel Cedric Leighton. Thanks so much for joining us.
You bet, Linda. Always good to be with you.
So this marks the first time Poland has taken direct military action against airborne threats from Russia crossing into its territory since the war began. Just how significant is this moment?
It's very significant, Linda. One of the key aspects of this is the fact that the Poles felt compelled to shoot down at least some of the drones. Now, we don't know, as you mentioned, how many drones or even where they actually fell in Polish territory, but it's pretty clear from some of the postings that we've seen from Polish government officials that drone fragments can be found on Polish territory. So the Polish authorities are looking for those drone fragments. They've asked people to make sure that they stay away from those fragments, but that they inform the police that those fragments are there and that they can actually be located. So the Poles are obviously a frontline state. They're clearly sensitive to this kind of violation of their airspace. And it really marks the first time that there's been a concerted effort, not by the Russians, to potentially take their drones into Polish airspace, but also a concerted effort by the Poles to respond with strength to these kinds of actions purportedly by the Russians. So it's a major change in the tenor of the basically frozen conflict that has existed between Poland and Russia up until this point.
Yeah, exactly. This isn't the first airspace violation by Russian drones, but certainly the first time Poland has activated its air defenses, scrambled its fighter jets. From a military perspective, what does this reveal about Poland's readiness to respond?
Well, what it looks like, at least right now, is that the polls have a very heightened state of alert, and obviously their alert phase has increased quite a bit because of the incursion of these drones. But the fact that they were able to respond so quickly indicates that they were already in a heightened state of alert, and that very fact is, I think, symptomatic of them being a frontline state. Basically, because they border both Ukraine and Belarus. Ukraine, of course, engaged in the war with Russia, Belarus, a Russian ally. And it also shows that with heightened tensions, there's an exercise that the Russians are going to be conducting with Belarus starting on Friday. That is going to also cause the polls to have heightened readiness state and heightened alert state. They've closed the border with Belarus, and that also indicates that they have been looking at this for quite some time from an intelligence perspective, and of course from a force deployment perspective as well.
So what's your perspective on Russia's objective? Is it deliberately provoking NATO, testing its rules of engagement?
When you look at the way the Russians have conducted these kinds of operations, you have to suspect that there is a deliberate approach that they're taking here. And that deliberate approach in this case would very much be to test Polish defenses. They want to see how quickly the Poles respond to these kinds of actions, what kinds of measures they take, what kind of...
This is the reason why I think that NATO needs to push back on Russia. Putin doesn't want to take the off-ramp. And the United States and NATO need to really start focusing on an aggressive policy to end the war by using force against Russia. They need to activate Article 5. That's what they need to do. That's my take on it. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the NAD+. NAD+ increases your energy levels by increasing the NAD+ concentration, and it will help to repair your DNA damage. As you get older, you start to accumulate DNA damage in your cellular DNA and in your mitochondrial DNA. This will repair both. That means that you'll have more energy and your cells will perform better. This will also protect your neurons. This is super important to take if you're 40 years of age. If you're male or female, doesn't matter, but take it every day, especially if you're 40 years of age or older, and it's going to protect your neurons. And remember, like what I said, you're going to know many people that get early onset of dementia because of the crisis that we went through in 2020. Ubiquinol, most bioavailable form of CoQ10. There's no CoQ10 better than what I have in my hand. You can't get a better CoQ10. Nobody sells it. Nobody sells a CoQ10 better than this brand of Ubiquinol. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Ubiquinol, take it every day. It's an antioxidant. It's going to soak up free radicals. It stacks well with C60 and NAD+. It's going to boost up those energy levels, help with the health of the mitochondria, and protect your neurons. Super important to take if you're 40 years of age or older. Take them together, the NAD+ and the Ubiquinol. Protect those neurons and help repair that DNA damage.
How often, from which airports, from which air bases, what are their procedures for civilian responses to this, such as shutting down their civilian airports like the Warsaw Airport, as you mentioned. So they're looking at all of these things. They're trying to assess how quickly the Poles will respond to an incursion of this type, and they can kind of assess them based on these actions that they are witnessing on the part of the Polish government. They can then determine whether or not they have to change their efforts if they want to surprise Poland at some future point, or if they're just assessing it from an intelligence perspective. But clearly it has operational significance for the Russians, and I firmly believe that they're assessing this from an intelligence perspective, and they probably want to operationalize those findings at some point in the future.
Colonel Cedric Layton, always great to get your analysis. Thanks so much for joining us.
You bet, Linda. Anytime.
There's a reason Chevy is called the heartbeat of America. It's in the pulse of those who never stop getting the job done, where the party started. This summer, Chevy drives America. Chevrolet. Together, let's drive.
All right, I want to see what Bannon's saying here. Come on. What's the problem with Rumbles is that every time you recycle, it always plays a new ad. I don't like it.
The profits back to politicians so that they are their spokesmodels. Short commercial break. Laura Loomer. Major security breach last night around the president.
All right, we'll take a look. We'll go back to that. All right. I want to listen to CNBC about the
today Bitcoin
the inflation number here by Rick Santelli.
Welcome back to Squawk Box. Rick Santelli here, live at CMHQ with the important breaking news on this Wednesday morning. PPI wholesale inflation for August expected to be up 0.3. No. Down 0.1%. Down 0.1. Wow. That would be the first negative number since April of this year when it was -0.2. If you strip out food and energy, we're also expecting up 0.3. It's -0.1 as well. -0.1, the same. Last time we had a minus number was April, and we're comping a -0.2 in April. And I do want to point out, last month we had up 0.9 on both those variables. They were the highest going back to March of 22. They just were revised slightly lower to 0.7, so 0.7% for each of those in the rearview mirror for July. Now let's look at ex-food, energy, and trade. Finally, as expected, up 0.3, which follows up 0.6 unrevised at this point. Up 0.3 would actually be the smallest going back to 0 in June of this year. Now the year over year, in my opinion, these are the most important. Boy, I'm surprised. Real progress here. 2.6 on year over year headline. We're expecting 3.3 in the rearview mirror, 3.3. 2.6 will be the lowest since it was 2.4 in June, and it underscores whether it was tariff driven or not. Those little blips seem to be moving back into the sunset. Year over year ex-food energy, 2.8%. That's core 2.8, expecting 3.5. In the rearview mirror, a whopping 3.7. 2.8 would equate to the smallest since June of this year, but that was the smallest going all the way back to April of 24. And finally, last but not least, probably the most important, ex-food, ex-energy, ex-trade, up 2.8, exactly as last look, which was up 2.8, 2.8 back to back, and 2.5 was June, just to give you a comp. We started the year at 3.5, so these numbers have indeed moderated a bit after the jump on the month over month last month. After that minus 911,000 big revision, we saw all the equities moving up. Why did they move up? Because, boy, that really does paint a much worse labor market. And now the inflation worry, at least on the wholesale side, gets mitigated a bit. Looks like the ease in September is going to go off as planned until we see CPI. Maybe that might be a harbinger. But at this point, interest rates dropped down to about 406, where they hover right now. That will be down 3 basis points in a 10, 352 in a 2-year. That would be down 3 basis points as well. And it does underscore that we still haven't been able to get below that very, very important 4%, which, by the way, is the low yield close of the year for a 10-year. Becky, sorry it took so long, but back to you, and congratulations on 3 decades for Squawk Box.
Go to the website
Now, that's green lighting for the Federal Reserve to actually lower rates in September. Inflation, the PPI is showing that it's controlled. Now, PCE is what the Fed usually looks at in terms of policy, but with the job market softening and PPI coming in stable. There's definitely going to be a quarter point. There's probably an 80% chance of a quarter point this month cut by the Federal Reserve. And I would say maybe a 30 or 40% chance of a 50 basis point cut in September. But the probability of another cut in October is increasing, definitely. Definitely. All right, let's listen in, see if we can listen into.
Active study of vaccinated and unvaccinated children. I think it's 16,000 vaccinated, 2,000 unvaccinated.
I can't play this because of the censorship on YouTube. I'll get a strike on it. I apologize. All right, so we have that. Let's listen to the BBC on Poland shooting down the drone.
Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk has confirmed that Russian drones were shot down in Polish airspace overnight. He said it was the first time this had happened in NATO territory. Mr. Tusk called it a large-scale provocation and said he was ready to repel such provocations. Well, Mr. Tusk has been meeting with defence and security officials to discuss the violations. He said that although the search for drones is ongoing, there was no reason to panic, and the situation is now under control. Well, the incursions happened during Russian attacks on targets in Ukraine, and Ukraine's President Zelensky said it set an extremely dangerous precedent for Europe. Russia is yet to comment. So let's cross over live to Warsaw, the Polish capital, to speak to my colleague Adam Easton. And although the ongoing situation is now descaled, Adam, obviously this is a huge concern.
Yes, Kasia, this is obviously not the first time that Russian drones have violated Polish airspace, but this is the first time the Polish and NATO allied military aircraft, the Dutch F-35s are currently stationed in Poland, engaged Russian drones and shot them down. It's the first time, as Prime Minister Tusk said in his remarks ahead of the government crisis meeting. This he's described as probably a large-scale provocation by Moscow. Now, the authorities in Minsk in Belarus, where we know that two of these drones have been discovered, Polish police have confirmed one, and local authorities have confirmed another, landed without causing any casualties, were damaged to one house quite close to the Belarusian border with Poland, in eastern Poland. We know that the authorities in Minsk have said that they alerted the Polish military that drones had gone off course and were heading towards Poland. But the significance of this, although no casualties have been reported, Mr. Tusk said, this is the first time that so many drones, we don't know exactly how many, President Zelensky in Ukraine said 8, Donald Tusk said a large number, had entered Polish airspace, violating Polish airspace, and had actually been shot down. So that's the first time that this has happened, and the Polish military called it an unprecedented act of aggression.
So tell me, Adam, then we're not 100% sure if this was a deliberate attempt for Russian drones to stray into Polish airspace. Whatever has happened, however this has got to this position, Donald Tusk and Karol Nawrocki, the new president, they're going to have to be working together in order to try and work out how best to deal with this situation.
That's right, Kasia. Mr. Tusk and President Nawrocki have already met this morning in a meeting at the National Security Bureau, and they are coordinating there. They are from different political camps, of course. They're opponents on the domestic political scene, but when it comes to national security, they're on the same side. And their comments this morning are suggesting a joint effort in terms of response to these incursions overnight. As I said, this is not the first time Poland has has been the victim of missile attacks from the war, Russia's full-scale war in Ukraine. 2 Polish citizens have been killed just after the war started in 2022, just near the Ukrainian border by the debris of a missile which landed on the Polish territory. And also, once there was a Russian cruise missile reportedly went all the way to central Poland, hundreds of kilometers from the Belarusian border, and landed near the city of Bitchute. And this wasn't even discovered until months later by a woman riding a horse in a forest. She discovered it. This was under the previous government. So, and as recently as last weekend, we've had reports of drones or unidentified flying objects landing in Poland. So this is not an uncommon situation. What is uncommon today is how many drones have violated Polish airspace, and also that they've been shot down for the first time.
Okay, Adam, as always, many thanks for that update. Adam Easton there, my colleague, joining us live from Warsaw. So, of course, also important to say that the airports have now been opened. Warsaw's main Chopin airport had been closed. Let's cross over to Kyiv. My colleague Sarah Rainsford joins us live now. And Sarah, this encroachment of these drones into Polish airspace, obviously a huge worry. This is off the back of a large attack overnight, raid of strikes across Ukraine.
Yeah, that.
Exceed every expectation in the new 2026 Infiniti QX60 from Ramsey Infiniti. Designed with distinction, the QX60 seamlessly blends sophistication and first-class comfort from its driver-focused cabin with available massaging front.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That is the context. This was part of a massive Russian aerial attack on Ukraine, where Ukraine is saying more than 400 drones were launched by Russia and more than 40 missiles were also fired. So here in Ukraine, people spent the night yet again in shelters, in bunkers, protecting themselves from that attack. And it was as people here were following the progress of missiles and drones on Telegram channels, on the internet, looking at where those things were heading, that they began to see some of them heading towards Poland. It was around about, I think, 1 o'clock in the morning here in Ukraine when I saw that chatter, and I saw people saying, look, these drones are heading some 50 kilometers into Polish territory. And that, for me, was a new turn, I think, in this war, because drones have strayed across the border into Poland before. They've never been shot down, and I don't think they've ever been this deep in Polish territory before, so far as we've been told. So I think, the fact that jets were scrambled not just to monitor the skies, but to shoot those drones down was quite a change. And here in Ukraine, in the past, there has been quite a lot of frustration with Poland's handling of, the threat on its border, if you like, because in the past, as I say, they have scrambled jets, but in some cases, they've kind of watched as the threat has turned back towards Ukraine, and then those missiles and drones, of course, hit here in Ukraine. So this time it is different. This time Poland itself is saying that it was essentially under attack. It's called this an act of aggression, and Poland did take decisive action. So I think the question here is what happens next, and Ukraine certainly is pushing for a tough response from Poland, saying this is Russia testing the West, pushing it to its limits and trying to see how the West will respond.
Yeah, and arguably Volodymyr Zelensky frustrated that despite efforts by Donald Trump to get him and Putin round the table to come up with some kind of ceasefire and peace deal, the Russians continue with these large-scale attacks.
Yeah, and I think we should point out that the attacks have escalated since the attempt by Donald Trump to negotiate some kind of peace to get Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky to the talking tables. In fact, since Donald Trump rolled out the red carpet in Alaska for Vladimir Putin, the attacks here on Ukraine have escalated. So people have been living with this increased danger. And, when you hear the drones overhead, you hear them buzzing, you don't know where they're going to hit. It is extremely scary for people here in Ukraine. And then the missiles, too, which have followed, 40 missiles last night. And just last weekend, we know that one of those missiles slammed into the main government building here in Kyiv. There was no one there. It was the middle of the night. But still, I think that was, again, seen as a symbolic kind of escalation by Russia, really, I think, testing
Kiev and Ukraine's resolve, but also its allies in the West, just seeing what response there will be. Because, of course, Donald Trump has promised all sorts of tough action against Moscow, but ever since he rolled out that carpet, ever since Vladimir Putin has done nothing to come to the talking table, the tough response hasn't happened either. So I think in Ukraine, that's what they're waiting for. What will the West do next?
Indeed. Sarah, as always, thank you very much. Sarah Rainsford, our Eastern Europe correspondent, talking to us from Kyiv, and just a number of lines coming out.
Let's see if we can get a little bit more Bannon in the show here, as long as he's not talking about stuff that may cause me to have a strike.
The target to $375 from $325 a share. When you look at the competition here, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, what does Oracle, or how does Oracle differentiate itself, not only for the customer, the client, but for investors?
All right, I'm going to listen in to
one of the things I would say,
Bannon talking to Laura Loomer. I have no idea what she's going to be talking about here.
CCP propagandist. He spends his time between Los Angeles and Beijing. He is the second husband of Jody Evans, who is the co-founder of Code Pink. He is a billionaire, and it's worth noting that Medea Benjamin comes from the very wealthy Benjamin family, big real estate family in the New York area. And so these people, they might look grungy, they might look kind of downtrodden, and they might look like, your typical leftist purple-haired freaks, but they are very well funded. And so, when you look at the implications of this, not only does it show that there's a lack of security within the Secret Service, something that is of grave concern, given the fact that President Trump has now survived 2 assassination attempts. The trial for Ryan Ralph, the individual in Palm Beach who tried to assassinate President Trump, began yesterday. We still don't have a full briefing on the Butler report, has not been released to the public. And yet we know that the Iranians have tried to assassinate President Trump on more than one occasion. Why do I bring this up? Well, because the individuals in this video and Code Pink founders are on video and in photographs traveling to Iran to meet with leaders of the regime themselves. And when you look at the fact that they are funded by the CCP and this massive shift towards multipolarity, you have to ask yourself, was this a foreign hit, a foreign intelligence trap President Trump? Was this an inside job from somebody at the White House leaking his itinerary?
Hang on for 1 second. We'll take a short break. Outrageous. Laura Loom is with us on the other side.
When the kids turn unholy,
Let's go to them talking about Oracle here. We'll go back to Bannon.
Continues to expand revenue at a good pace over the next 7 years. They are going to be spending a lot of money to train their models in order to stay ahead. So I think there's a lot of relationship over there. If, let's say, you and I don't use ChatGPT as much, that would have an impact on OpenAI's revenue. That would have impact downstream revenue on all the other players, whether that's NVIDIA or Oracle. But frankly speaking, we're not there yet.
I'm looking at the Mag 7 members and how they're performing today. NVIDIA is up almost 5%. Amazon down 1.9%. Alphabet, which is the parent of Google, up marginally, up 1.01%. Microsoft getting 0.6%. It doesn't feel like this is a situation where it's a zero-sum game. Oracle wins and Microsoft, Google, and Amazon lose. Or is it?
So there are a few companies that fall into this bucket, and then those include Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, Google Cloud, CodeWeave, Oracle, and NWS, for example. So these are the ones that are seeing extra spending right now. But when you look at on the application side, whether that's Salesforce or Workday, those guys are not seeing that benefit because they are not in that infrastructure game. So there's a huge difference between the two vendors or between the two category of vendors. Right now, we are more in the build phase of AI, not the implementation phase of AI.
It's hard to believe, Scarlett, but this stock is now worth more than, has a larger market cap than Walmart, Eli Lilly, JP Morgan Chase.
Yeah, that is pretty remarkable. And again, it feels like it kind of came from out of nowhere.
You're right on that.
Very recently.
Which is why I brought up, Amazon, Microsoft, right? Anurag, I mean, the fact that those were the names we were really talking about when it came to AI. And then sort of Oracle comes out of the blue.
Yeah, but that's the whole point. This particular infrastructure, if you're going to run large models, it's very unlikely you're going to do it in-house. I mean, you can do it, but you require a lot of investment going in. You're better off renting out data center capacity or computing capacity from one of the cloud vendors. And Oracle has the money to spend it. And they have the relationship with NVIDIA to get those GPUs. And on top of that, they are offering this to customers and saying, here's my equipment, come and test it out the way you like it. Amazon, on the other hand, for example, sells it as a package. And then that's where you're seeing some distinction and also the sizes I mentioned before.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the drops and the lozenges. Make sure you're prepared for the fall and the winter season. Something's coming, and you just got to be prepared. Right when you have that throat irritation, take them right away. You get 100 drops in each bag. The drops are smaller than the lozenges, but they're very high quality. You can get it in cherry, in honey and lemon, and also in blueberry for the drops. Get a few bags for your household and for work. Be prepared. Right when you had that throat irritation, mitigate it right away. I also have in stock elderberry zinc lozenges. Get a 21 count. The lozenges are larger. Get a few bags for your household. Be prepared. I'm telling you, fall and the winter in the United States is going to be problematic. Just be prepared. All right, let's listen into Bannon's show at the moment here.
And the president, you had the vice president, you had Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War, and you had Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Pete, and I think Marco released Pete just back from being with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff down in Puerto Rico about what's happening in the Gulf of America and off of Venezuela. You had the basically the National Military Command, the civilian part of it right there, with a Secret Service that you have to say is asleep at the switch. Why that place was not scoured, and particularly these code pink types, know who's in the thing and turf them out if they're there is shocking. And they were just feet away from the president with steak knives and glasses right there, ma'am.
Yeah, look, I mean, I pointed it out, and I think that's even Susie Wiles in the back, too, if you go and you show that other angle of the video. So not just cabinet members. I haven't seen that angle, but in the video that you just showed before you showed the tweet on the screen, I think that's even Susie Wiles. And so you have the chief of staff. I mean, you could have taken out, looks like, majority of the cabinet. And then you're right. As I tweeted last night, we would have had Mike Johnson as our president this morning, God forbid. But I do want to say something else, and it needs to be said. It is, what, now almost 11 a.m. Eastern, and we have not heard a statement or seen any type of statement from DHS Secretary Kirsty Noem, who technically speaking is in charge of Secret Service. I mean, and so where was DHS Secretary Kirsty Noem as President Trump was being berated by foreign agents from Code Pink? Oh, that's right. She was with UK Home Secretary and jihadi sympathizer Shabana Mahmood. I mean, so you have these jihadi lunatics just inches away from President Trump. They could have thrown a steak knife at his heart and stabbed him to death, or cut his jugular with a piece of sharp glass. I mean, look, how come Secret Service isn't immediately whisking him away or tackling these women to the ground? Look at that. She has a knife.
Exactly. Why are they not? They said it's over now. Why were they not thrown right to the ground and cuffed right there and dragged off to a not to DC Metro? Go ahead.
It gets worse. So where was Kirsty Noem yesterday when all of this was going down? And again, she has not issued a statement. She was with UK Home Secretary and jihadi sympathizer Shabana Mahmood. Okay. She is a literal sympathizer for the globalized, the Intifada movement. And so why is Secretary Noem legitimizing jihadi sympathizers who are calling for the Islamification of the West? There's photos of her with Shabana Mahmood all over Twitter, and she hasn't even issued a statement about this. So this is the problem, right? We don't have a Republican Party, and I hate to say it, even people within the cabinet of the Trump administration, they don't have what it takes to call out the threat of Islam in America. And we are about to witness a Muslim communist from Africa take over New York City, Steve, the largest city in America. And we're going to see copycats all across the country. Why do I bring this up? Because if you think that this is going to be an outlier, what we saw happen to President Trump last night, that's going to happen to every single non-Muslim in our country. You are going to be harassed by these jihadists when you go out to eat. Our politicians are going to face threats of assassination from these Palestinian lunatics who are calling for a globalized intifada and calling for jihad against anybody that doesn't want to support a Palestinian state. We saw it last weekend in Detroit, Michigan with the People's Conference for Palestine. And I just want to know, what is it going to take for the Trump administration to take these jihadis seriously? We hear talks about revoking their visas, right? But what is it going to take? We already saw a Palestinian murder 2 Jewish people, a beautiful young couple outside the DC Jewish Museum. What makes them think that these people aren't going to assassinate the president? I mean, hello? We've already had political assassinations in our country at the hands of Palestinians.
Last night they should have been thrown to the floor, cuffed, and taken not to the DC Metro, but to a federal prison. To allow that to happen that close to the President of the United States, and remember, they're holding up Luigi as a hero. If they had done something to the president last night, all over left-wing media, you would have seen these people as a hero. Laura, what are you looking for out of we got about a minute here. What are you looking for out of Kristi Noem? By the way, I keep saying there's going to be a civil war in the UK because you have Sadiq Khan as the mayor of London. The same thing's going to happen in New York. But I might add, Laura, with all you're coming in hot on this, the polling shows 60% of young Jewish people under the age of 30 are going to vote for Ma'am Donnie, and I think a third of his staff are young Jewish professionals. So this is all happening out in daylight. New York's going to be just like London in 10 years. This is the actual real threat, and people are now, all the big donors and all the big corporations in New York City are bending the knee to Mamdani, just like they did in London, to bend the knee to Sadiq Khan. Ma'am.
Yeah, well, look, it's a tale as old as time. Only 20% of the Jews left Egypt. That is a real statistic. And so, unfortunately, it appears that there is a severe mental illness or a mental deficiency or some type of, genetic malfunction within 80% of the Jewish community. And I say that as a Jew myself. They vote against their own interests. They have suicidal empathy. They stand with jihadists who openly call for their eradication. And look, first
I don't think America's doing all right. Everything is starting to fall apart. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the zeolite. Zeolite will remove heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals. You take 3 small drops underneath your tongue, drink the filtered water, do that every day, and you're going to be able to urinate those toxins out within 6 to 8 hours. But the key is to do it every day. Now, you can do a heavier detox by taking 10 small drops underneath your tongue and drink the filtered water. Do that every day until the bottle's done. Do that once or twice a year. But I recommend that a daily 3-drop protocol is probably better because you're detoxing your body regularly. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the zeolite, and drink it with the filtered water. Stay away from processed foods and clean your environment. Get rid of those chemicals that are in your home, in the cupboard, in the closet, in the basement, or even in your garage. Because these chemicals that you're surrounded by on a daily basis, they're disrupting your endocrine system. They're disrupting your immune system. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the zeolite and detoxify your body. Also, I have a great supplement. It's nattokinase. This is going to help your cardiovascular health. It's going to help to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. But it will also break up clots. And guess what? The fall and the winter season is probably going to be problematic, and you need to pay attention. And to break up clot formation, you're going to need nattokinase and omega-3. And my digestive enzyme complex, because my digestive enzyme complex has bromelain in it, and it's fibrinolytic. So get the nattokinase, break up those clots, get the omega-3 to prevent the red blood cells from over-sticking, and get the digestive enzyme complex because it's fibrinolytic also. So please go to my store, get the nattokinase, be prepared, be prepared. Taking it every day helps with your cardiovascular health. But being prepared for the fall and the winter, it's even better. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's listen into, I guess NASA cuts access for Chinese
doing
citizens.
what they can to advance their space program. NASA typically has restrictions for employing Chinese nationals, but this is kind of a new level. All right, for our listeners in the U.S., a reminder that you can listen to us via satellite radio on SiriusXM channel 121, access the world's only global audio business network, coast to coast, 24 hours a day, and Bloomberg Radio on SiriusXM channel 121 is presented by Oracle. Keep it here on Bloomberg Intelligence.
This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Scarlett Fu and Paul Sweeney.
How do you think the Fed is looking at tariffs, the uncertainty of tariffs?
All right, let's take a look at some of the other news that's happening. Okay, let's listen into CNBC about the PPI index.
At Janus Henderson Investors, we believe working together is the way to work better. With your goals and our expertise in perfect harmony.
Mohammed, let's jump on a potential third option. As Steve was talking about these two options, is it the buyers that are doing it? It is the sellers who are paying for it. There's a subsection, a third category that could come up part of this, and maybe it ties back to the fact that the jobs market is so weak. Are the makers of this stuff eating it but making up for it by squeezing as much productivity out of as they can out of their existing job base, not hiring new people, and maybe relying a little on AI to get some of that effectiveness kind of wrung out of things?
I mean, absolutely right. There's the exporter, there's the importer, and there's the consumer. And so far, the consumer is carrying the least of the burden. I can tell you what's going on right now in companies is they're going product by product, going through the elasticities, what they think the consumer can absorb in terms of price increase without destroying demand. And they're finding out that they cannot pass through as much of the price increase as they want. And that is particularly true for those who sell to lower income consumers. So what we're getting is this has to be absorbed either by the exporter or the importer. They get hit on the profit margin. The consumer, because the consumer is
Well, we've passed it on to consumers for 5 years now, ever since COVID hit. Remember, Carlos Gutierrez came on and said, look, if prices are going up as a manufacturer, as a company, you better get ahead of it and raise the cost to consumers. Consumers are saying, no more, we can't take it.
Correct. Consumers at the time had checks appearing in the mail.
Yeah.
So they were able to absorb the price shock. They cannot absorb the price shock right now. So what we're learning is that the final impact on the consumer is much less than people expected. This number now, if the Fed is truly data dependent, the question should be, why not 50?
Right. Do you think that's on the table in a big way?
If it's a data dependent Fed, it should be. The employment side is much weaker than they expected, much weaker. And now the latest inflation print is much better than they.
Okay, so but if you're right, then should equities be moving higher on the back of the news? Is that solely a function of the Fed? And is that even make sense at this point of the ballgame?
The economy is not great.
Right. No, that's why this sort of, what's happening now is the market's doing this sort of bad news is good news situation. But I'm wondering when there's any bad news is bad news.
So look what's happened. When you look at the risk on assets, equities, credit spreads, they are at near or at record level. If you look at the risk of assets, gold, record level. If you look at government bonds, they're now finally out of bad territory. They're now in bull market territory since the lows of 2022. So we have this situation where risk on and risk off are rewarding investors. Okay, so don't just focus on the risk on. Also ask the question, why is the risk off also doing so well?
But then square this. We just had Charlie Scharf on from Wells Fargo, and he says that in what he's seeing, and we've heard this from folks at Bank of America, other folks who say, from what they're seeing in their business, everything is just fine. I mean, meantime, then you have Jamie Dimon suggesting maybe that the economy is weakening. I mean, this is why there's a debate.
So he went on to say, and I wrote it down, when you asked him about the lower income consumers living at the edge, there was his phrase, they're running down whatever cash balances they have. That data shows it's going up. So it really matters which consumer you're talking about. And I think that's something you've been talking about.
Meaning that they may be spending up 0.3% according to Bank of America over the last month, but at some point that is not going to continue because they don't have the cash cushion. Maybe they're finally spending down this cash cushion that they've also had since checks were going out back in 2022.
Correct. And
2023 as well, I should say.
And the only debt that's not going up is mortgage debt. If you look at the burden, credit card debt higher, car loan debt higher, delinquencies on both are higher, right? So the liability side is flashing yellow. The cash side has been okay so far, but if he's right, we're getting to a stage where the lower income people, now the big question has always been, does this weakness migrate up? And this is why people worry about things becoming non-linear, that it gets worse slowly, then it gets worse quickly. Certainly on the employment side, we have enough evidence to suggest that we are near that risk.
Which means what? Now that you've laid out that scenario.
So you heard me say the Fed should have cut in July. If I was sitting in the Fed, I would have a serious discussion about a 50 basis point cut right now. They did it last year. So if I was there, I would have significant discussion about 50. I would want to know how much of the weakness in the labor market is on the demand side or on the supply side. But you need that conversation. And then you need to realize that's not sufficient. We also need to move forward on the deregulation agenda to make sure that the supply side responds. I am very optimistic as to what's going to happen to productivity in a few years. I really do believe in the AI, positive shock, life sciences, robotics. Those are all productivity enhancers. We just have to get through the next year or two.
At Janus Henderson Investors, we will.
Let's see what Dan has to say here.
Yes, if I may.
Please.
When I was doing research to identify the harms that children were facing in VR, which I had to be sneaky about because legal wouldn't actually let me do it, I identified that Roblox, the app in VR, was being used by coordinated pedophile rings. They set up strip clubs and they pay children to strip, and that Robux can be converted into real money. So. And I flagged this to Meta. I said, under no circumstances should we host the app Roblox on their headset. You can now download it in their app store.
I'm going to turn this back over to the chairwoman because my time has expired. I just want to end by saying this. It is abundantly clear to me that it is time to allow parents and victims to sue this company. They have got to be able to get into court and to get in front of a jury and hold this company accountable. And that begins with Mark Zuckerberg. There has to be accountability. We need to open the courtroom doors and allow victims to have their day in court.
Holly, you got to go pretty far in the woods to hit your tripwire, but they hit the tripwire yesterday. Who were those folks and what caused you to come on so hot there at the end?
These are researchers who worked for Facebook. These are Facebook employees. And Steve, you hear all the stuff that they were testifying about, all the child porn that's all over the web. You and I both remember it wasn't so long ago. If you even mentioned child pornography, if you mentioned child sex abuse material, you were called every name in the book by the left. They said, oh, that's just a fantasy. That's all a conspiracy theory. That's not going on. These are Facebook researchers, big-time liberals, by the way. You read their declarations. These are libs. I mean, it's their political views. They're not conservatives. But it made them sick to their stomach what this company was doing, exposing kids to child sex abuse material in order to make money. And that's the problem with these tech oligarchs. It's all about their power. It's all about their money. There's nothing they won't do, Stephen. I mean nothing. They will not do in order to extend their control over our families and over our country. And we cannot allow that to happen.
Senator Hawley, what your hearing yesterday showed is that these researchers were paid to actually go do this. They showed it to senior management. This is happening. Senior management went out of their way to hide that, to make sure they continued on to make profits. Am I correct? They not only didn't make any changes, they hid the fact of what was happening and children were exposed to.
Yeah, they hid it and they falsified it, Steve. I mean, they came in and they said to these researchers, oh, whoa, your research is showing that there's a lot of child abuse on Facebook. Falsify the data. And then they turned around to the public and their shareholders and said, we've done all of this research and it's all fine. I mean, Facebook's a great, upstanding company. They're lying to their shareholders and the public. They're committing fraud. And listen, if you follow these companies at all, you know that this is just par for the course, but it's sickening when it involves our kids. I mean, is there nothing these people won't do in order to make money and get power? And the answer is no, there is nothing, including taking away the innocence of our own children. These people, they have got to be held accountable.
Because of the heroic efforts of the FTC and even Lena Khan before that, and President Trump in his first term, they're in federal court. We're looking to break them up, both on Instagram and other things that they have to actually force them to start to deconstruct their company. But somehow Zuckerberg got into a dinner last week, sitting next to the President of the United States, particularly on the day that Bobby Kennedy had the Star Chamber, given everything that Facebook had done to steal the 2020 election, suppressing the information about the vaccine mandates, all of it. How does that happen? How are you going to get folks in the Senate to get worked up to actually go after Facebook as you should and open up to people to go after them, when somehow somebody in the administration and or the White House thinks it's appropriate to have Zuckerberg sitting next to President Trump at dinner?
You know, isn't it amazing that, as you say, the very day that Bobby Kennedy's getting raked over the coals because he's trying to take on the people responsible for the chronic disease epidemic among our kids, this guy, Mark Zuckerberg, one of the worst purveyors of child abuse, when you look at this testimony from yesterday, is going scot-free. I just want to emphasize something you said about President Trump. He took on these companies in his first term, all of these antitrust investigations and prosecutions that he launched that are now bearing fruit. That, to my mind, is one of the most important, significant things he's done. We need to keep the pedal to the metal on that, number one. But number two, your point about Congress. Congress has a role to play here. Congress shouldn't just sit back and say, well, good luck to you, President Trump. Good luck to you, DOJ. You guys go prosecute him. No, we need to open up the courthouse doors on these companies. Right now, these companies are the only ones in America who cannot be held accountable in court for what they do. You know, if Ford builds a car that blows up, you can sue them. That's as it should be. Right now, these companies have built platforms where your kids are getting abused. You can't do anything about it. Congress needs to change that. Congress needs to end the sweetheart deal and allow Mark Zuckerberg and Meta and all the rest to be sued in court by victims.
Last thing, I know you got to bounce. We got about a minute or two. This education report that came out is nothing but catastrophic and completely falling off the cliff of young people's ability, with all the money we put in education, they're falling off the cliff on reading comprehension, on writing, on math skills, on science, across the board. What can be done about it? I mean, this is now this has now become a crisis, and it just ties back to a lot of factors. But it ties back. The big falling off the cliff goes back to the beginning of the smartphone. What say you, sir?
I would just say this, that the smartphone and the AI revolution, pretty soon our kids aren't going to be able to write a thing because AI is going to do it all for them. Already you hear these technology gurus say, oh, we need to outsource teaching. Let's just replace all the teachers with phones. Let's replace all the teachers with computers. Let's just let the kids sit in front of a screen. I mean, are you kidding me? That's the worst thing possible. We need to put more power back in the hands of parents. Parents have had their power taken away from them, left, right, and center. In education, in technology, we need to be putting power back into the hands of parents, and that begins with taking power away from these tech companies. I don't want them running our education. They're destroying it. I don't want them running our kids' health. They're destroying it, and I sure as heck don't want them running this country.
Senator Josh Hawley, where do people go to keep up with you, sir?
Holly Mo, you can follow me on Twitter, on social media all across the board at joshhawley.com.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Got to ask yourself, one of the most MAGA states in the Union, Missouri, have generated two of the best MAGA senators. Think about that. Folks in Missouri, you're doing this redistricting. The only thing I would say is give us that last seat. Let's go maximization. Don't give the Democrats, and don't give them anything. They don't deserve it. Don't rate it. They're taking 25 seats in New England? Folks, this is all inextricably linked. Just telling you. One of the things we've got to do is start breaking up these companies. Say, oh, we need these national champions against the Chinese Communist Party. Hell, they're helping the Chinese Communist Party. Don't give me that excuse. Oh, this is our bulwark against the Chinese Communist Party. Farthest from the truth. What happened yesterday, you saw Facebook, you saw Zuckerberg, one of those evil people in this nation. He should be in prison for stealing the 2020 election. Stealing. You saw them in all their glory yesterday. I'm going to get some compilation of the clips from this hearing. Absolutely monumental what these whistleblowers are saying. Curdle your blood. Short commercial break. Birchgold.com. Go talk to Philip Patrick and the team today. Birchgold.com. Promo code Bannon. Talk to Philip Patrick and the team. Why is gold on a run? What are the forces driving it? Short commercial break.
Yep, your worst nightmare. Your car broke down. Now you're worried it's going to cost you a fortune in repair bills. Unless you already call CarShield, the legit #1 auto protection company in the country. When you're protected with a plan through CarShield, the process is smooth like ice and done in as little as 3 steps. 1. First, the tow truck takes your car to the shop. The cost of towing covered when you got a plan through CarShield. Next.
All right, let's take a look at something else here. Let's listen to the Hill and the Israeli strike on Hamas in Qatar yesterday.
Download the app and get 50% off your first Wonder order with code 50Google.
They didn't take it, and so they got blown up.
Exactly. So
scroll less, learn more. Find your school district's plan at ny.gov/phone free.
Google's changed its motto from don't be evil to do the right thing. Google's YouTube TV plans to remove Univision from its $83.
Security organizations and authorize a surgical precision strike on the terrorist chiefs of Hamas. Israel acted wholly independently, and we take full responsibility for this action. And this action can open the door to an end of the war in Gaza.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu there confirming his country attempted to kill several senior members of Hamas in an airstrike on Tuesday. In Qatar, a key U.S. ally in the region and the primary mediator between Israel and Hamas. Hamas officials were reported near the capital city of Doha to discuss a ceasefire proposal backed by President Trump. Hamas officials say the strike failed to kill senior officials, but didn't specify if they had sustained injuries. The strike, however, did injure a number of civilians and killed at least 5 people affiliated with Hamas, according to the group, as well as a member of Qatar's security forces.
Now, the attack marks a stark escalation of the conflict between Israel and Hamas. President Trump took to Truth Social yesterday afternoon to give his take on all this, writing in part, "This morning, the Trump administration was notified by the United States military that Israel was attacking Hamas, which very unfortunately was located in a section of Doha, the capital of Qatar. Now, this was a decision made by Prime Minister Netanyahu. It was not a decision made by me." He continues, "I immediately directed Special Envoy Steve Witkoff to inform the Qataris of the impending attack, which he did. However, unfortunately, it was too late to stop the attack. I view Qatar as a strong ally and a friend of the U.S., and I feel very badly about the location of the attack." Later on Tuesday night, Trump stopped to speak with some reporters and said this about the strike.
The whole situation is not a good situation. It's very unhappy about every aspect. And we got to get the hostages back. But I was very unhappy about the way that went down.
The Qatari Prime Minister said Tuesday that his country will continue its role as mediator, but denounced Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu by name and has formed a legal team to determine how to respond.
So here's how this all went down. President Trump had a proposal to end the war. These are the negotiators meeting to discuss it, and then Israel blew up the negotiators. So that is not good to me, and Trump seems quite upset. And they did it in Qatar, which is a country we use.
We have a great relationship with them.
To do mediating here. Now, I know I saw the conservative reaction was, well, they rejected the initial deal, and Trump said this was going to be the last deal you're going to get, and they rejected the deal, Hamas did, and so it's back to the drawing board. They're going to get blown up in the meantime. I don't think this is a productive way to end the conflict, and I don't like that we are in charge. We are in charge, and I feel like for any other country, Trump, the government has no problem saying, hey, we're the superpower, we could decide things. But with Israel, they just do whatever they want.
Right.
And then we were in the middle of this negotiation. We were informed at the last minute it was too late to stop. Trump makes it sound like he didn't want it to happen, and it was too late to stop.
And it played out in real time because Caroline Levitt was having a press briefing and explaining that, oh, yes, Trump did know about this, I guess trying to save face. And then we find out later in the day, they called them because Qatar was like, yeah, we got a phone call as it was happening. What is that? And so, don't be surprised as Washington is managing all this fallout if Qatar or other Arab nations just say, we don't want to be involved in this mediation. We're not involved, when obviously, there's benefits of trying to get this solved for President Trump. And like you said, it just seems like Israel can just do whatever. I mean, innocent civilians were killed now in a different nation, which is problematic to somebody that we consider an ally.
Well, the people killed were Hamas.
No, but there were other people in it, like one of them was a civilian that was killed. So, and then we violated sovereignty and also possibly damaged the relationship, even though Qatar said they're going to continue going forward. They don't have to.
Right. I don't think we actually damaged the relationship. I think Qatar doesn't care, frankly, about people in Hamas getting blown up. I don't think the leaders of the Arab nations don't actually care about the plight of the Palestinians. Their people do, so they have to pretend to care. That's the sad reality of this. I mean, they don't want to take them. Nobody. Saudi Arabia doesn't want to take them. Nobody wants. Jordan doesn't want to take them. Nobody wants to take in these people, and that's the problem.
Don't you feel like don't you, because you may not. I feel that President Trump is almost emboldening Benjamin Netanyahu because he's saying things on Truth Social, like last warning, accept the deal. Like the last warning was last week or early this week. He said last warning. And so then this is like, and I'm not even trying to be funny, but this is that Trump always chickens out issue, because you're saying, and that's the word taco, you're saying one thing, and then now you're surprised that Netanyahu was emboldened to do anything about it.
He said the last deal, they didn't take it, and so they got blown up.
Exactly. So if somebody says last warning, and then the president's acting like, oh, this is very bad, I was so caught off guard, it's not what I like. Like, well, you empowered him to continue on. He said last warning. Thirdly, I'm not going to say it again.
That, we're all cool. And hopefully a signal to Hamas that they need to release the hostage. I mean, I agree with President Trump on what you have. Release the hostages, give up power, or Israel is going to continue to try to kill all of you and to do mass slaughter of civilians in Gaza, which is horrible.
Right, and that's looked at upon as war crimes and international war law violation, which has been multiple articles written about that. No, if people are saying that, then why would the U.S. as a whole continue to say, like, even that statement, whether you agree with it or not, rings true, is that Israel will continue to do whatever it wants. And if the rest of the world is saying and looking upon this and saying, okay, let's figure out a real solution here, then we have to just figure out what the best solution is. It can't just be whatever Benjamin Netanyahu wants to do, because I'm sure and confident that people in Israel have a variety of views, and it's not only what we do in America, not only what President Trump wants to do. So that's the thing. Like, don't you think it's time to try to figure out a real solution aside from just continuously murdering Palestinians?
I think it's time to get out of this conflict. It's time for the U.S. to end its involvement entirely. I would cut off the weapons aid to Israel.
But that feels like choosing a side to many people. That feels like choosing that you're no longer going to help our allies.
It's not our responsibility. And they can buy weapons from us, but we don't need to give them money. I would end all foreign aid to every nation on the earth, even nations whose decisions I fully endorse and love. we can trade, we can have good relationships, but we don't need to be bailing out other countries. And then they can work it out themselves. Both sides in this conflict, frankly, are being unreasonable. Israel is unreasonable because they are indiscriminately killing and starving thousands and thousands of people. It's unreasonable. Hamas is also completely unreasonable. They're at war with a power they can't possibly defeat. All of their people are being killed. Any respectable, legitimate nation or government would surrender and sue for peace. They're fine to have all of their own people get killed and their own leadership get killed. So they're totally unreasonable. And when both sides in a conflict are unreasonable, I say, well, why is it my problem? They don't want to work this out. If they want to work it out, fine. Come talk to us. We'd love to help. Qatar would love to help. Whoever, we'll help. But if you don't want to do that, then we're not going to do anything.
And because we're involved in this, right? And like we have an air base in Qatar, with thousands and thousands of people. Like, let's say at any point, like they continue to attack wherever we find out, right? This is public information about these negotiations because we're considering that a peaceful location to get them done, right? That's why it's public information. Otherwise, I'm sure they would have, if they would have known something like this was on the table, we probably wouldn't even known that these negotiations were happening and where. But because now this information has been public, like let's say there's Americans involved and other people in the room, like this just creates a disaster that almost is uncontrollable because as you try to figure out a solution, you can't just be also blowing up the places where people are and knowing that civilians get harmed because the minute that that's an American person, then there's going to be upheaval where you said like if we don't need to care or be involved. Well, let's say that goes a step further.
Israel's taking the position that these are, they're at war with Hamas. They're going to kill members of Hamas wherever they can be found.
Even if civilians are collateral damage.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's part of, I don't approve of, civilians as collateral damage, but look, the Palestinian people are collateral damage in Israel's view. It's not constraining their behavior. It doesn't constrain our behavior. We, drone struck a building that had the Houthis in it, that there were other people in that building. I mean, it's the way modern war is conducted, unfortunately. That sounds like I'm endorsing it or excusing it. It's unfortunate. It's not a good thing.
Collateral damage is less in modern warfare than it was during World War II. The accuracy of dumb bombs was within plus or minus 2 miles. Plus or minus 2 miles. I mean, no one has historical context. Why? Because no one knows their history.
Conversation with Trump about how they like to move forward since that's our ally.
Well, right, and they're not willing to do that. They're going to conduct this war in whatever way they see fit, is what I can tell. They don't feel constrained by our behavior or by our desires to have them, rein this in. Trump has tried at various times to really put forth a peace plan to get there was a ceasefire in place. He's trying, and it's just it's difficult because these are these are militants that have been fighting each other for in some sense thousands of years. So why did we think we were going to come in and get them to stop fighting? When they're ready to stop fighting, we're there to help. But if they want to keep fighting, I would just like to be uninvolved, and I think most of the American people would as well.
Yeah.
Next up on Rising, street artist fame sees true identity could be exposed. We'll be right back after this.
All right, let's listen into Bannon here, see what he has to say. I'm not sure what he's talking about.
They try climate change. They try everything. The pandemic, the pandemic, COVID-19, things associated with climate change. The world's going to change. The seas are going to rise. The forests are going to be on fire. They're always trying to intimidate you and get you to huddle inside and just watch streaming, bread and circuses, right? And stay doom scrolling. On your heavy kids. Are you saying that this is since nothing else has worked, that the populist nationalist movement is punched through this, and this is why this fight at the beginning of the show against big pharma is so important? You just said Josh Hawley against big tech, right? We need to stand up and take on these big conglomerates. Are you saying this entire your concern is this entire UFO thing looks like another sob to the big arms merchants or the space guys, or etc., to divert our attention from what's real in front of us, which is the powers of money and technology trying to control this country and every person in it?
Absolutely. I mean, your sign behind you says it all. There are no coincidences, right? And so, like, we always have this huge problem. Now the media is shifting back over to, oh, look, we attacked a UFO, guys. They're real. Like, who wants to pay up more taxes? No, we'll just increase that through inflation. And, I mean, ironic enough, like, I hate seeing this kind of crap because it does take away from everything.
So hang on a second, because I want to talk about My Patriot Supply, because I love your company.
We love you, Skip, and the whole War Posse.
Thank you. Hang on, because I would take Bitchute, APL, and Burleson. And Burleson's one of those Missouri.
All right. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the gel. I have it in the quick dispenser or in the tube version. Make sure you have some at home and at work. Why? The fall and winter season is going to be problematic. You better be prepared. All right? All you got to do is just listen to the news. It's coming. All right? So you just be prepared. Now, the gels are dual purpose. You can use it as an aftershave to soothe razor burn. You can put it on a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn to help to heal it quicker. Why? Because it keeps it clean. And you can use it as daily skincare. It stacks well with collagen, vitamin C, C60, and also resveratrol to help with the health of the skin. In addition, you can put it on your hands, around your mouth, around your eyes, around your ears, around your nose, lightly coat your nostrils. It stays active for 5.5 hours. Do that if you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well. Again, it stays active for 5.5 hours. Be prepared. Fall and the winter season is coming. And it's going to be problematic. Max 35 parts per million. Cleanse is 30 parts per million. They're at different price points. This is the first pillar of my anti-aging protocol to help to boost up the immune system. This stuff works very well. I've been doing this for over 5 years. Take a teaspoon a day, every day, swish it in your mouth, gargle about 20-30 seconds and swallow. What this will do is improve the health of your oral cavity and your oropharynx, increase your mucosal lining, help with the health of the epithelial tissue, and that will help to boost up the immune system. It has other benefits, but take it every day. If you're not feeling well, or someone around you is not feeling well, take a tablespoon or 2 a day, and then go back to your maintenance dose once everything's all clear. Be prepared. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Max 35, the cleanse, and the gels. Be prepared. And by the way, they help to slow down the aging process. All right, let's take a look at. All right, let's listen into Fox News by Jesse Waters.
Hello, I'm 5-time Olympic gold medalist Amy Poehler. I've been asked to talk to you about the new puzzle game, Royal Kingdom. It is so much fun.
And we should all agree, riding a train shouldn't be a death sentence. Daily Wire co-founder Ben Shapiro joins me now. So Ben, why do you think the media deep sixes a story like this?
Unfortunately, Jesse, I think it's perfectly obvious why the media deep sixes this particular story. And the answer is perfectly obvious when you look at the races of the people involved. If this had been a black victim and a white perpetrator, then it would have led the news nightly for months on end. You would have had riots in the streets. If it's the reverse situation, the media will completely ignore it because it doesn't match up with their preferred narrative of a white supremacist country that is cracking down on black people, even though statistically speaking, obviously, the vast majority of crime is intra-racial, meaning white on white or black on black. Black on white crime on a per capita basis is significantly higher than white on black crime. That does not match up with the media narrative about white supremacy in the United States.
Do you also feel like they're sensitive to being called racist by their friends, family, and colleagues for highlighting black crime?
There's no question about that. In the echo chamber that the legacy media live in, if you even mention black on white crime, then you're immediately seen as racially discriminatory in some way, because the basic idea on the left is that white against black is really the story of America, as opposed to blacks committing crimes against white people. To even mention that is to undermine the entire narrative of the 1619 Project, for example.
By re-releasing these people out into society after 11, 12, 14 prior arrests, isn't there something about self-preservation? The judges and the DAs alone, why would they do that? Why would they turn these people loose over and over again?
It's ideologically horrific. You know, I have a book called Lions and Scavengers about the mentality that suggests that
I think they're releasing these individuals into the wild, right? Because they want social disruption. And they want a situation where actually the whites lead the city. Because these are happening mostly in inner cities. They want the white flight. And these individuals are creating a narrative that, oh, there's so much crime, there's so much economic depravity that we need more social programs and a push for reparations. See, if blacks have good jobs, if blacks have stable family life, God, country, and family is what I call it. If blacks are integrated into the society and we really have a colorblind society, then there would be no reason for reparations. But if there's economic instability, if there's racial instability, if there's a lot of anger, if there is this apologetic aspect where it's the oppressed and the oppressor, then it increases the chances of reparations. So to push reparations, you have to create civil conflict. Now, people will make money on reparations. How? Well, what if there's a fund that's created? And who manages the fund? Or lobbying groups coming from the black constituencies flowing into the Democratic Party. PAC money to help with certain types of bills to be passed in Congress for reparations or set it in motion for reparations. But you have to create economic disparity and create an environment where there is some sort of an apologetic thought process in the society to push the reparations. So this is an orchestrated effort. And this is the reason why I keep on saying you have to push back. Conservatives have to push back and prevent reparations, and conservatives have to push back and tell the liberals it's about God, country, and family. It's not about this ultra-liberal BS. And call it off for how it is. Black males in general, especially like this one, are out of control. They're on drugs. They have this rap mentality, this inner city ghetto mentality. They don't dress properly. They don't talk properly. Black people have the most opportunity ever in American history as now. They've never had it any better in terms of opportunities. Is it their fault for not taking those opportunities? I would say yes. 2 generations ago, individuals, 2 generations ago, black males dressed properly. Black males tried to find good jobs and to help their family and try to move up the social ladder. But because of rap and because of the ghetto culture and because of the street urban fashion and this laziness of American society, I mean, just look at this kid. Look at this guy who killed that woman. And he's all tattooed. He has these dreadlocks like he's Bob Marley. He's just ghetto. Just ghetto. Now, obviously, he doesn't have God, country, and family. And it's not just him. You got to blame the family. You got to blame the parents to letting this happen. These kids need more discipline. So if you want to have a better society, you're going to have to start turning conservative and making sure that kids are getting educated, that have proper manners, that know how to eat at the dinner table. So I don't believe this BS that it's all economic disparity and why this is happening. They have so many opportunities to rise up and do better, but they don't take it because it's easier to listen to Ice-T and Snoop Dogg. It's easier to look ghetto. It's easier to be a drug addict. It's easier to be a piece of shit. And this is what we have. This is what happens. But the Democratic Party, the ones that are in power, they're letting this happen because they want the conflict. They want the conflict.
Is acting badly, they must be a victim. And that is the mentality that undergirds all of this. When you hear the mayor say that you can't incarcerate your way to safety, that's precisely wrong. You absolutely 100% can incarcerate your way to safety. We do not have an under-incarceration problem in America. We have an under-incarceration problem. We need these people locked up for longer periods of time. This particular person should have been involuntarily committed for mental illness, he had violent schizophrenia, or he should have been in prison for armed robbery, which he had been convicted of in the past and done, I believe, 5 years in prison already for.
So we had a big crackdown on crime in the 90s. Clinton and Gingrich kind of took control.
And here's the problem. Look at that. He's got the dreadlocks, he has the tattoos, he's got the urban wear. This schizophrenia that they're talking about is self-induced through drugs. And this is another problem that's happening in the youth in America. The legalization has ended up causing mental instability on top of having pulmonary problems later in life. But it's legal. I'll tell you, there is a big difference when you raise a family in a suburban environment that is highly educated, cuts their lawns, it's a quiet neighborhood, there's ethnic diversity, but there is a certain level of respectability that's happening in the society compared to urban. And just compare the two. The white picket fence type neighborhood versus the urban shithole. Right there. And so when you make it so bad, then the Democratic Party can always say, we'll give you more, we'll give you more. We'll give you reparations. We'll give you social programs. We'll give you. And so now you're on the urban plantation. And they don't care about you. They just want the black vote as a block. But they don't help. They don't really help the situation. Now, there are blacks that are waking up to this, and they're like going, okay, it's about a meritocracy. Can't afford to go to college? Go in the military. go to the library and learn a skill. But instead, legalization of drugs that leads to mental disorders. And this is going to happen more and more. Again, blacks have never had it any better in American society in terms of social mobility and getting jobs. But yet they're still screwing it up.
And crime rates did go down significantly. There was some blowback over the last couple campaigns because a lot of that was crack versus cocaine. They thought it was racial. But let's take the drugs out of it. Just on violent crime, should America go back to those types of tough sentences?
Yes. Absolutely. There used to be a man named Joe Biden, and back when he was a senator in the 1990s, he was very much in favor of actually imprisoning criminals. And then when he ran for president, he decided that he'd been wrong all along. Well, actually, Joe Biden, before he was brain dead, was actually right. He was right back in the 1990s, and Americans found that out when New York turned from one of the least safe cities in America to one of the most safe cities in America, specifically because of harsh crime policies in the city of New York and all over the country.
Yep.
So the resistance you're seeing from these politicians, especially Chicago, because they're the worst, is this about not wanting to be exposed as feckless? Because they have just not been able to reduce crime significantly during their time in office. If Trump comes in and is effective, doesn't that just blow their whole case up?
It doesn't just blow up their case and their case against President Trump. It blows up their entire worldview. Their entire worldview is that crime happens for deep white supremacist systemic reasons. And if it turns out that crime happens because you're not doing the most basic thing, arresting and imprisoning people who commit the crimes, then their entire worldview is just wrong. And it turns out that personal responsibility and putting bad people in jail is the best way to keep your citizenry safe.
So the media is playing a big role in this. You see it with Chicago. They think it's like going to be, I guess, troops coming in and just slaughtering innocent civilians. And you see it by the way they cover this case in North Carolina. It's a Republicans pounce. Why is this framed as Republicans pouncing?
Well, that's always the narrative. The way that it works is if a Republican does something wrong, the Republican doing something wrong is the story. If a white person does something wrong, the white person doing something wrong is the story. If a Democrat does something wrong, it's Republicans pouncing. It's the Republican response to the story that somehow the story. It's a great way of avoiding the actual real problem here, which is, innocent people being murdered on trains because of horrible and feckless and gutless and terrible governance.
Right. They're ducking and putting their fingers at politics when it's just about law and order. All right, Ben, the book is out. Where can we find it?
You can find Lions and Scavengers anywhere books are sold, over at Amazon or at Audible and over at
I was wondering why he was on all these different channels and he's promoting a book. That's why. All right. And now that makes sense. I was wondering what was going on with him. Okay, let's listen in to Stephen Bannon see if he's on a commercial break or not. Come on. Is he over? I don't know how long his show is. I'll tell you, I don't like Rumble so much in terms of stopping and starting a live feed. Let's see here. Let's listen into Bloomberg.
Taking after Tesla in terms of door design, and for the most part, what we're seeing is sort of copycatting or taking after EV for EV, right? Trying to field a Model Y fighter that also has doors that are similar to the Model Y.
I'm wondering. I don't think your story got into the story got into this correct, but what's the legal ramifications here for Tesla? I would imagine the lawsuits are piling up. I mean, if my child was stuck in a Tesla and I couldn't get him out, I might be suing Tesla.
Yeah, a handful of lawsuits. We are aware of a handful of lawsuits, and I think one of the complicating factors here is Tesla pushes its customers into arbitration for these sorts of suits. That this is part of the sort of purchase agreement when you buy a Tesla. That is something that litigants are going to have to sort of overcome because of that sort of policy on the part of the company. I think another sort of complicating factor here is that one of the a couple that we speak with in the story, they had no inclination to sue Tesla immediately after the crash. It took one of the first responders coming to them after the fact and saying, hey, we really had a hard time getting to you, and it was because of your vehicle. That is part of the issue here. You don't necessarily know right off the bat, hey, something wasn't right here. I need to do some investigating.
Craig, really fantastic reporting by your team. Craig Trudell is our global autos editor for Bloomberg News, joining us from London. And Alexis, I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, but maybe it's not so embarrassing now. I did not know how to open a Tesla door the first time I sat in there. I was really bewildered, and I just couldn't figure it out. I was kind of stuck until it was in an Uber, and the driver told me, no, you got to press the button.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I don't think I'm going to be jumping into a Tesla anytime soon.
Yeah, this gives me pause.
Bloomberg Intelligence will be right back.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the dual-purpose deodorants. This will help to detoxify your body, and you use it as a daily deodorant. It's for males and females. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas. Very high-quality ingredients. Has no aluminum, no baking soda, all natural ingredients. You can get it in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree, and in citrus. So get the very high-quality deodorants and detoxify your body daily. Also, get the structural nano silver toothpaste. Very high quality toothpaste. Get a few tubes of this for your house, and it will whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, help with your gum line health, and reduce inflammation at the gum line. And with good oral hygiene, you're helping your vascular system and your valvular system. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver toothpaste. Now, why is that so important? Well, we're going into the fall and the winter season, and you're going to need this toothpaste. Trust me. Never wrong. Gladiator barley. Gladiator barley will help to build muscle, do some resistance training with the gladiator barley. It's a high-density protein. You take it every day. You mix it with soft foods or filtered water or smoothie, even with milk. I mix it with soft foods like hummus. It'll help to bring down inflammation and soak up free radicals and detoxify your body. Now, if you're doing this every day, guess what? You're building muscle, you're helping your A1C levels, you're bringing down inflammation. That helps with your vascular system, that helps with your immune system, that helps with your brain function, because by bringing down inflammation at the brain level, the neurons aren't inflamed. The neurons are healthier. The myelin sheath is intact. So you have better cognition. And by bringing down inflammation, you're recovering quicker after your workout. And you're soaking up free radicals. So this is going to help you to not just detoxify and build muscle, but slow down the aging process. So get the Gladiator barley and stack it with the Myotrol for max benefit. All right, let's listen into Bannon.
You have McCarthy's raising a ton of money. Schwarzenegger's doing his thing. It seems like it's people are saying we don't want Trump, although Trump is not just the leader of our movement. They have millions of people in California that are Trump supporters. And President Trump
6.1 to be precise.
And President Trump keeps saying if you got a chance to spend more time there and you had not an election fraud, we could win it. As you see it right now on the map, on the battlefield of getting to just this November, not the governor's race, how do you bring these parties together? And they haven't agreed upon a message yet. Some want to go with Trump, some don't want to go with Trump. Schwarzenegger definitely wants to keep him out. Of course, I think he's a spent force. But just as you see today running a pack, where are we?
That's an excellent question. The optics are problematic because, as we know, the left and the extremists are very good at context creation and splitting the vote by creating optics that make us all of like Occupy Wall Street, where like nobody has one cohesive message. The other problem is that we have a jungle primary in California. So it makes it very difficult, but you're right. Really, the
We know the
message.
jungle primary in the selection coming up in November.
Not in November, right?
It's a yay or nay. Okay, here's what your PAC said you're going to do some polling regarding where we stand between now and
Yeah.
November.
So the next.
When we get that, we'll get you back on, because right now I'm going to put the 5 seats in the winning.
You're like, and a check for the Democrats.
No, it's not.
I know.
It's not. Listen, Newsom and these guys. Newsom's running for president of the United States off of this. He's a guy that, and I kept saying, he's a guy that we impeached. And it said, but if you put up, some of the clowns you're going to put up and running against him, you're going to. So we had this huge movement. People worked their tails off, put a lot of money up. It was magnificent to actually have a recall, right? And then they lost it on the alternative, which you should have just left it open. And he won 65-35. This is a tough hombre. He's been, his model for California is a disaster.
It's a disaster.
As your polling shows. You know what he's saying to that? You're right. Your polling's right. So we're not going to talk about that anymore.
Right.
Right. I'm going to redistrict, become the champions of the Democrats for taking on Trump. I'm the only person that's taking on Trump and win. And he's going to use that to springboard himself to the head of the Democratic primary. And he's going to recreate a bunch of crazy policies that the Democrats will recreate.
Yeah, they'll duplicate the efforts all across
so
the
that's
country.
why California is the battlefield right now.
It's the beta test state.
And yes, and we've got to win this. And now I see a lot of money potentially being raised, but you've got the kind of the corporatists with McCarthy. You've got the never Trump guys with Schwarzenegger.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to keep Trump out. And hey, we are burning daylight on this thing. And it's a super high priority, not just
right.
for 5 seats. Because, you net those 5 out, we've probably got overall 15 seats with another 5 in Florida, 15 gross on the gross amount. Maybe 16 or 17. You net those 5 out, it's 12, and we're going to have a fight to hold the house. Where do people go to learn more about you, more about your PAC, your social media, all of it?
I am on Instagram, Sophia J. Karstens, and I am on my website for my super PAC, which is decamerica.com.
Did you get any feedback when you did that? We only give it 60 seconds. Did you get any feedback? Is my cup? Oh, we'll get to you later. The feedback when you gave that great C-SPAN picked up in the when you were reading people the riot act about that. You got good feedback about that? That's what led to the lawsuit.
Yeah, in fact, that was on the heels of the extremists trying to hijack an assembly hearing in real time.
Wow.
And cutting the mic of the vice chair and everything else. And that moved the needle.
Mike Lindell, it's been another tough day in the war room. We'll see you back here at 5. Sell me a sheet, brother. Make me feel better. Give us a deal.
We got the war room posse covered, you guys. Remember, we're closing out this line of sheets, the My Pill for Kill sheets, any size.
This is America. I'll say, I'm gonna look back years later at this show, this Yard Wars and some of the telemetry shows, and you sit back and you're kind of like going, what the hell was going on in America, at the time? Yeah, it's a good cross section of the time period. It's almost like it's bread and circus. It's a free for all. There's lots of social turmoil. There's technology advances. But what is interesting is that when you look back and try it for yourself at home, maybe in the next few days, look back and listen to Charlie Rose, some of his older episodes, maybe in the early 80s, all right? Or Larry King in the 80s, or William F. Buckley in the 70s, or even in the 60s. And you'll start to notice that many of the problems that we were discussed back then. Just that the names were different, maybe even the political party's perspective on it changed back and forth, but it's the same issue. Or if you don't believe me, take a look at what JFK was talking about when he was running for president in 1960, or when he shortly became president. What were the economic issues that were taking place? And you will notice it's the same stuff that we're talking about today. Social unrest, inflation, job market. Just everything's more sped up. We have more technology. But mankind has been talking about these questions for a long time. There was a debate between William F. Buckley and Reagan. And they're both conservative. But they were talking about what they should do with Panama. And if you listen close, this was when Carter is president. And they were going to renegotiate a treaty. And this is when Panama was going to be passed on to, the Panama Canal was going to be passed on to Panama. And then you fast forward to Trump's administration saying that he wants to take Panama back. These are the same issues. Same issues. 40 years later. 45 years later. Things haven't changed. Now, if you don't believe me, just look at old film footage of ABC, CBS, of the 1970s, of the 80s. And you'll come to realize that nothing has changed. We've been arguing back and forth about the same issues for 45 years, and nothing has changed. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the lignans. Lignans will help your endocrine system and your immune system. They'll bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals, super important for your cardiovascular health and for your immune system. Turmeric soaks up free radicals, brings down pro-inflammatory cytokines, super important for your vascular system and for your immune system. You start to notice a theme here. Ashwagandha root brings down cortisol levels and helps you to control your blood glucose levels. Super important for cardiovascular health and immune system. Chronic elevation of cortisol does tissue damage, ages you faster, and suppresses your immune system. If you bring it down, your immune system goes up. So take ashwagandha root, turmeric, and the lignans, boost up that cardiovascular health and your immune system. It's a dual purpose stack. You're gonna need this in the fall and the winter. Now, why would I say that? Why would DrPaulCottrell say that you need turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans for the fall and the winter? Have you been paying attention to things that are transpiring on the West Coast and in the South? There's another wave coming, and you're not going to be able to stop it. So you better be prepared. Now let's play a video about Big Pharma. No, not Big Pharma, Big Ag.
To job site.
Big agriculture.
We have been struggling with high nitrate levels in our source water.
It could be farm runoff, fertilization, number of things.
Nearly every Iowa county in the Hawkeye State is battling against manure being released into their water.
11.12 ends over the limit.
Treatment plants across central Iowa are having a hard time treating it.
We have what was at one time the largest nitrate removal facility in the world, and unfortunately, even that wasn't able to keep up with the level of nitrate that we're seeing in the rivers.
We have beaches in Iowa, but they're closed. They have algae. They have bacteria.
The lake, it's really showing up green right now. It's really sad.
Nitrogen pollution is a big problem in Iowa. It's dangerous for people and for the environment.
But there's also a whole other side of this story that's frankly more troubling. It's about the big and powerful vested interests who have really allowed the contamination on such a wide scale.
I don't think it would be a surprise to anyone that there's pressure on legislators and government officials from special interest groups.
The status quo in Iowa is working for some people and not working well at all for many others.
I think in 2007, we were made aware that our nitrate levels were higher than normal. Everybody is connected to a farmer. Everybody is connected with somebody who has had cancer. I'd say 4 or 5 people for sure. Everybody knows that about who have died of cancer, and it's becoming creepy. I'm Steve Pick. I'm in Rumson, Iowa. I'm 67 years old, and I've been here most of my life. I was a city clerk in utilities for about 34 years. There has to be some correlation between nitrate levels and cancer.
Iowa's cancer rate has been climbing in near lockstep with the rising use of nitrogen on farms for decades. Scientists, though, aren't sure if the correlation is causative or merely coincidental. What we do know is that age-adjusted Iowa has the nation's fastest growing and second highest cancer rate overall after Kentucky, and is one of only 2 states in the U.S. where the cancer rate is still growing at all.
Iowa used to be sort of this marshy swampland, and to make it as productive as we have, we've essentially plumbed a lot of our fields so that we can get the water off the land and make the land more amenable to crop production.
Iowa is really among the most heavily modified landscapes in the entire country. Starting with European settlers, it was literally carved up into squares for individual farming families. With the endless green fields, it's hard to see how farming in Iowa could have a negative impact. But if you look a little closer, you realize it's like any other major industry, driven by market forces, entirely indifferent to ecological and human health. Most of what is grown goes into animal feed and ethanol for fuel. Corn yields have risen enormously in the last 50 years. To achieve that productivity, the state's farmers spread nearly 4 billion pounds of nitrogen from fertilizer and manure on Iowa's 13 million acres of corn every year. Many in the scientific community are worried.
When too much work bogs you down, Asana helps you handle it. AI makes it easy to hand off routine tasks and stay focused on important work. That's how work gets handled. Visit us at asana.com.
This is essentially our sample intake lab. So those are treated seeds. That's how we do agriculture these days. And that seed is colorful because it's painted with pesticides. We spray on there an insecticide, a fungicide, maybe an nematicide. And this is something we spent a lot of time studying. These coatings, once the seed goes in the ground, if there's rainfall, these do get washed away. Farmers just will buy what they're being sold. This is what their local representative will say is this is their seed for this year, and they'll just use it. There are challenges when it comes to water quality, and I think concerns over the challenges that might be there for public health as well.
This is our well field here that supplies our water. We had one bad well. Well number 8 was extremely high.
To get the nitrate out of the water, Steve Pick organized the community of Remsen, raising hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy almost 100 acres of farmland above the well field. They replaced the rows of corn and soybeans that were growing there with native prairie grasses, and the deep roots of those grasses successfully absorbed much of the pollution. Steve Pick won a Clean Water Award as nitrate levels in Remsen's wells plummeted about 40% in just a few years, but then it was all cut down.
$15,000 worth of seed of planting all this and wildflowers to be just thrown away, to be sprayed. It was pretty disheartening.
Starting in 2010, more conservative politicians came into power across the state, and the project was effectively killed. Steve Pick was fired in 2012. A few years later, in 2015, nitrate levels had shot back up. This is when the story gets really interesting. Iowa's Department of Natural Resources sent a scientist to investigate the rising levels of nitrate in Remsen. That investigator identified the Tentinger cattle feedlot on the edge of town as the source of the pollution.
It comes from there, down through this creek, down that way between the ball fields, and then weaves through town, through Beck Park, and eventually ends up in our well field.
Emails show that the DNR's chief of compliance at the time, Barbara Lynch, closed the investigation to avoid political blowback. DNR records show residents repeatedly complained about the farm's manure flowing through town, but state investigations were shut down at least twice. By 2017, Remsen's shallow wells were so filled with nitrate they had to actually be turned off. Remsen now has a $10 million water plant to treat deeper wells and much higher water bills.
Nobody really questions it at all. They just live with it.
Political interference like that is not unusual in Iowa. In fact, what happened in Remsen was a microcosm of how agricultural interests wield extraordinary power over the Department of Natural Resources and other state institutions to protect the ag industry, endangering public health.
I'm Claire Ruby. I work for the Department of Environmental Science and Sustainability here at Drake. For 20 years before that, I worked for the Department of Natural Resources of Iowa.
In 2019, Claire Ruby co-wrote a research paper that was led by Chris Jones of the University of Iowa.
The 2019 paper, oh boy.
That report examined the waterways around Remsen in northwest Iowa, where livestock feedlots have proliferated in recent decades alongside a leap in crop farming. Nitrate is a byproduct of both.
What the paper showed was that there was a doubling of nutrient application in those watersheds, leading to significantly higher nitrate concentrations in the surface water. It's completely unnecessary. Folks aren't just applying what is needed to grow those crops. I discovered that there was a meeting about this with a number of the powerful ag players. I looked through the door and I saw on the screen a PowerPoint that talked about activist scientists. And things really went downhill after that.
At that meeting was a group called the Iowa Farm Bureau.
Advocating for family farms on issues raised by local farmers, the Iowa Farm Bureau fits the true definition of a grassroots movement.
The Iowa Farm Bureau.
AT&T business support? Hey, sorry to call again. I think we're ready for faster internet. You can do that, huh? It's that easy?
The Iowa Farm Bureau projects a wholesome image, but essentially it's a lobbying machine for the big ag businesses in Iowa. These guys don't look exactly like the typical farmer. Established in 1918, the Iowa Farm Bureau includes all kinds of investors and bankers and lawyers and goes far beyond farmers. It has unusually deep pockets for an industry trade group as well, thanks to corporate profits that it earns from an insurance subsidiary that's very large. The IFB is so influential that it was able to insert entire passages from its own publications without any citation into an early draft of the Iowa Nutrient Reduction Strategy, the state's voluntary blueprint for reducing nitrogen and phosphorus emissions. This regulation-free rule book is what allows the agricultural industry to operate on a volume imperative. The system involves farmers who are incentivized to maximize harvest by huge demand for livestock feed, and also the federal mandate to turn corn into ethanol for auto fuel. Federal government basically indemnifies them against losses by subsidizing crop insurance.
I worked about 20 years for the Iowa Farm Bureau as the Director of Research and Commodity Services. I was quite involved with some of the discussions on the Iowa Nutrient Reduction Strategy. It's really just how much nitrogen do we need to grow a bushel of corn. Right now in Iowa, we do about 1 pound of nitrogen per bushel of corn. That's highly efficient. In 1980, we were 1.5 pounds of nitrogen. Nitrogen is the most expensive input I have on this farm. I don't want to waste it. Now, could it be done more efficiently? Theoretically, yes.
Applying blanket fertilizer has become the norm in modern farming systems, but some believe there are better and cleaner ways to do it. Iowa State University agronomy professor Matt Liebman founded and ran the Marsden Farm project from 2002 until retiring just a couple years ago.
If you look at what's down below the oats here, you can see alfalfa plants that were planted at the same time as the oats. So corn likes to grow after alfalfa, and you can grow that corn with less fertilizer after alfalfa because roots can move more quickly through the soil to greater depth and explore the soil for more water and nutrients.
Liebman proved that by rotating corn and soybean with alfalfa and grains, such as oats, farmers could actually earn more money while using 85% less nitrogen fertilizer.
The principles and practices that you're seeing out here are well known for decades, for centuries. Most farmers have been moved toward a financial situation where they're trying to maximize their gross revenue. And if they find shortfalls in their profit because input costs are high or market values are low, the government, through your subsidized insurance, helps them maintain profitability. Because we don't assign a cost for externalities for what happens downwind, downstream, and downhill, the production economics favor the high use of inputs and the high use of farming practices that don't necessarily translate into good environmental and human health outcomes.
Some folks will say regulation is the way, but regulation is a real dirty word here in Iowa, and folks don't want to have that conversation. I'm not blaming farmers. This is the system as it stands. This is what in the U.S. we call a food production system.
I would argue the Farm Bureau's system is the envy of the world relative to getting quality agricultural input and involvement of producers in ag production policy. And so when we talk about regulations, no, I'm a fan of set out voluntary guidelines and make sure the system rewards sound economics.
The Iowa Farm Bureau has been campaigning.
The world is changing faster than ever, and at QBE, navigating those changes with you is at the heart of what we do. We're a global.
The Iowa Farm Bureau has been campaigning for years to be sure that farmers do not have to follow strict regulations. That has allowed environmental policies to remain secondary to economics in the state. Lobbying records in the state legislature show the IFB has consistently opposed and tried to repeal any measures that could take up farmland for other purposes, such as solar panels and environmental restoration. While Big Ag prefers to maintain the status quo, new science suggests a rethink might be wise.
There's been some concern that maybe that 10 milligrams per liter standard is not health protective enough. And there's been plenty of science that has started to find associations between nitrate in drinking water and chronic health impacts like bladder cancer, colorectal cancer, thyroid cancer, and birth defects. So here in Iowa, we've got communities that are routinely drinking levels of nitrate where people are wondering, is this truly safe even though the EPA tells us it's below the standard? Back in 2010, the EPA acknowledged that there was new data around nitrate and chronic health effects that suggested that they needed a new health assessment. But here we are in 2025, and we have not completed that health assessment.
Today, I'm pleased to make the largest deregulatory announcement in U.S. history.
For years, federal environmental laws and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency have really stood in as nature's last line of defense in Iowa and elsewhere. Now, though, the current administration wants to disband EPA's Science and Research Division, the only branch that does these risk assessments, as President Trump seeks to slash EPA's budget by more than half.
What happens downstream of us, this just kind of keeps continuing and continuing and continuing all the way to the Gulf, really, where you see the hypoxia zone. This is a whole interconnected system. This is not isolated to us.
Why do the fish kills keep happening? It's death by 1,000 cuts. We just keep doing this over and over. So it's not just a drinking water problem, it's an ecosystem problem. But we've gotten used to it. It starts to feel normal.
It seems like the bigger the operations around here get, the more they're reliant on chemicals. I'd like to see a happy medium in there, but it seems like it's just going way too far out of whack. Looks pretty clear, but I still wouldn't drink it.
We're going to pivot over to BBC and protests hits France as new Prime Minister takes office.
With YouTube Music Premium, listen to your favorite songs ad-free. Download music and podcasts to listen offline.
Sébastien Lecornu has been sworn in as France's new Prime Minister. These are the pictures of Mr. Lecornu at the official handover ceremony with his predecessor, François Bayrou, who resigned yesterday on Tuesday after losing a vote of confidence. Mr. Lecornu becomes France's 5th Prime Minister in less than 2 years. All of this comes as police in Paris used tear gas during protests, which are part of a nationwide day of action against government policies. Demonstrators say they're angry at leadership in France and austerity policies. Well, let's go straight to Paris and join my colleague Mark Lowen, who's been following developments there. Mark, just bring us up to date on what's been happening where you are.
Yeah, Regina, we were outside the Gare du Nord, the station which connects France with other neighbours next door this morning, and that's where there was tear gas used as about 1,000 protesters tried to get inside the railway station. Now the protest movement has moved here to the centre of Paris, to Place du Châtelet. It is part of a day of civil disobedience and social unrest under the banner Bloquons tout, let's block everything. We've seen high schools and highways and some roads and bridges and train stations blocked in different cities across the country. Almost 300 arrests made by police people extremely angry at what they see as social and economic inequality, but also that anger fueled by the appointment of Sébastien Lecornu as Prime Minister announced last night, and he's now taken office. He is from President Macron's centrist camp. That despite the fact that the left wing came first in elections 14 months ago, and the left says it is time for them to govern. They're extremely angry at President Macron. They want him to resign. Let's bring in a couple of protesters who are here with me in the centre of Paris. Marion and Jacques, and thanks for joining us, both of you. Just explain why you're here today.
Today we're here because French people do not agree with budget, that is the provisional budget for 2006.
You don't agree with the budget cuts that the government is trying to put through, the austerity measures, the cuts?
That's it. We think we can do a better budget that is really good for people.
But Jacques, France's budget deficit is almost double the limit imposed by the European Union. It is spending more on interest payments on its debt than it does on education and defence. So isn't it time for France to tighten its belt and live within its means?
I don't think it back because you have the state's debt, but the state's debt is already paid each year by the. I don't know how to say it in English, but we borrow to the bank, so we only pay the interest of the bank. And you talk about European Union regulation. It's something we can change. And you can also imagine other ways to reduce the deficit by getting more taxes for the revenue, for reducing the help to the companies without any proof of efficiency on.
This is what I have been saying for a while. The debt of these countries like France and the UK are going to cause social unrest. It's playing out right now. And the interest on the debt keeps on going up. Their bond yields are going up. That's bad because every time they have to issue new debt or revolve the old debt, they're paying a higher interest. So to solve this problem, they're going to have to heavily tax the wealthy. The uber wealthy that are in France, 75% of their income. Secondly, they're going to have to truncate their social programs. Some of the social programs have to be completely eliminated right away. Others will have to be titrated, especially their retirement type and healthcare type social programs will have to be slowly reduced depending on where you are in your age cycle. But the bottom line is that both have to happen. See, one side, the rich, will say, just cut the programs. The other side, the poor or the middle class, are saying tax more of the wealthy and the corporations. The answer is both. That's the true answer. But it won't happen. And so the society will collapse.
We have 200 billions of aids given to the company without any proof.
What do you want to change in France? What is the priority for you?
A lot of things. In fact, we are here with the budgets, but it's a long situation. It's now for many years, maybe 10 or 15 years, we are all doing the same policy. We want less austerity, more public power. But just to give you a concrete example, in our institute, we work in the National Cartographic Institute. We have all this discourse about empowering the institutes to face global warming consequences, etc. And we are facing a reduction of 30% of our personnel during the next 5 years. So,
what do you think of the new Prime Minister, the fact that the President has chosen a centrist, one of his own group, as his 7th Prime Minister now?
It's just continuity. It proves that things won't change with this president. I don't really personally know the new Prime Minister, but it's not.
It's not the president. It's the society. Too many social programs ended up causing, and also too much corporate greed, both are happening, that led to a debt cliff, and they're at the cliff. And they don't even want to, they don't even see the solution. They have the social program. They can't afford the social program, so they're going to have to be eliminated or radically truncated. And if you do this right, you'll be able to ramp them down. So the ones that are retired, they get their program. The ones that haven't retired yet, but are about ready to retire, you're going to have less. And you just keep on whittling away the social programs based on the age. The younger you are, the less you get, up to a point where you don't get anything. But that also means stop the corporate corruption and heavily tax the uber wealthy. The uber wealthy. You're talking about the billionaires. And that way you're paying, you have fixed the deficit. You're now in a surplus because you have less social programs to pay for, and you pay down the debt and have less interest payments. And after about 10 years of this, the society will be robust and more effective. But there is going to be a painful transition for 10 years. None of them are going to be willing to do this. So the society is going to collapse in France. It's going to collapse. You're seeing it happening right now. If you paid attention to the history of France back during Napoleon's day and the Third Republic and all this stuff, right? This is similar. This is similar. It's going to collapse. Watch.
Program of person, it's really a program of project.
But Jack, is there time for a stability? I mean, you know, the party that many of you support, that France Unbowed, says that it will vote down whichever government comes in, which is not part of the left. I mean, France could be here time and time again with governments falling at a time when France is very unstable and the world needs a stable France.
But you're right, stability is important. For me, for myself, I would prefer to stay on my sofa instead of working here. But stability will not come with voting the next austerity budget of Macron. We need Macron to go to have stability. He's the origin of the most instability in the country right now. And you say, I just had something about our new prime minister. You described it as centrist. It's we can argue about that. In fact, we have proof from a newspaper, Mediapart, that he's doing private dinner with the far right leaders. So,
and are you calling for Macron to resign, Marion?
Sure, we do for a long time now, but it won't be enough. We all French citizens and workers have to show that we don't want anymore all these years of conflicts.
Marion, Jack, thanks very much indeed. President Macron says, of course, that he will see out the rest of his term until 2027. He says there is no way for him to resign and that he will stay in place. But the overwhelming majority of the French people now place the blame very much for France's polarization, its political paralysis, and its rising social discontent very much at his door. We'll continue to watch the protests unfold here in France as the new Prime Minister takes office, the third one in the space of 9 months. Virginia, back to you.
Mark Lowen in Paris, for the moment, thank you very much.
Thursday Night Football on Prime is back. It's on. Thursday Night Football returns as the Commanders face off against the Packers.
Okay, so we're going to go to Bloomberg's Balance of Power. But before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Clarity Factor. Clarity Factor will get rid of that brain fog. It'll allow you to concentrate at work or at school or even at tasks at home. Really important to take every day. It'll help to support memory. Get rid of that brain fog. You'll be able to concentrate. You take it every day, drink it with filtered water, and over time, you're going to have positive neuroplasticity. You're going to be thinking faster, and your memory will be better. It stacks well with C60, resveratrol, NAD+, and ubiquinol. Why? Because those are all neuroprotective. Vitamin B complex is also neuroprotective. Vitamin B complex is also going to help to boost up the health of the mitochondria. The first 4 B vitamins is involved in the electron transport chain within the mitochondria, so it'll produce more ATP, so you'll have more energy. This will help to improve your cellular metabolism, and B12 will help to protect your neurons. Super important. You can stack it with Clarity Factor. It's a great way to do it. You should be taking vitamin B complex if you're 40 years of age or older. Resveratrol soaks up free radicals, helps the health of the mitochondria, boosts up your energy levels, helps with youthful gene expression, and it helps you to get rid of cells that are in senescence. Super important to take. Stacks well with C60, ubiquinol, and NAD+, and clarity factor. And omega-3. You're going to need omega-3, especially in the fall and the winter. Why? Brings down systemic inflammation. By bringing down systemic inflammation, it's going to help your immune system. But not just that, it helps you with the cardiovascular system. And omega-3 will prevent red blood cells from sticking. Guess what? You're going to hear a lot of people having overclotting issues, just like you had in 2020, and 2021, and 2022, and 2023, and 2024. Guess what? Take the nattokinase that I have in my store, or the digestive enzyme complex, because it has bromelain in it, it'll break up clots. And guess what? Omega-3 helps to prevent those red blood cells from sticking. Now, omega-3 also helps to bring down your LDL levels and increase your HDL levels, so that reduces oxidized LDL. So less plaque formation. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, to get the omega-3. Get the resveratrol, the vitamin B complex, and the clarity factor as a stack. So you're helping with your brain function. You're helping protect your neurons and your cellular metabolism and energy levels. You're getting rid of senescent cells, and you're helping your cardiovascular system. So that's a powerful stack right there. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. And make sure you subscribe to my Substack. Help support the work that I do, because all these videos I do are for free. And guess what? If you really pay attention to what I have to say, especially in my special videos, I'm actually trying to save your life.
Grip, stability, precision. That's the essence of driving. Lawful.
Poland's Prime Minister says his country is the closest it's been to open conflict since World War II. This after NATO fighter jets shot down Russian drones. It says entered Polish airspace. Scorched earth shows where the drones hit the ground.
Yeah, according to Prime Minister Donald Tusk, there were 19 intrusions in all, and many of the drones came into Polish airspace from neighboring Belarus, an ally of Russia. He said that he's activated NATO's Article 4, which sets the stage for consultations with NATO allies. Tusk also adds that it's the first time Russian drones have been shot down over a NATO member state's territory. After a meeting with Poland's National Security Bureau, Tusk said his country is ready to repel what Poland is calling Russia's act of aggression.
We are most likely dealing with a large-scale provocation, but at the same time we're in consultation with our allies. I am in constant contact with the NATO Secretary General. This is so that we can respond to this type of threat as effectively as we did tonight.
Nick Clayton Walsh is following the story. He filed this report.
Behind me here is a meeting of what's called the E5 top European defence officials. The Polish defence minister meant to be had to rush back to deal with the crisis in his own country. The French defence minister, actually now the Prime Minister. But still a message here of unity they're trying to get out. The UK Defence Secretary John Healey calling this a new level of hostility from Russian President Vladimir Putin, and saying that the actions taken by NATO jets, Dutch aircraft scrambled to intercept these drones, marks the first defensive action of its kind since Russia invaded Ukraine. What we know is that during the night, 19 intrusions were recorded by Poland into their airspace. That may not mean 19 separate drones, but certainly 4 of them shot down, according to some initial Polish official reports. And indeed, damage done to civilian infrastructure from that debris falling. Extraordinary to see some of the video. The noises we've become accustomed to hearing over Ukraine now over NATO territory. Russia's Ministry of Defense, referred to for answer on this by the Kremlin, have said they did not intend to target Polish sites. That's not the same. They're saying they didn't intend to send drones into Polish airspace, but they're also saying they're open to dialogue with Poland on this matter. Polish airspace closed during the bid to counter these drones. Extraordinary to even imagine, frankly, this moment of NATO's eastern flank security being in doubt this far into Russia's invasion of Poland. A significant escalation by Moscow, whether they try to suggest this was potentially a navigational error or the result of GPS jamming or something, as they may do in the days ahead. Clearly a designed move here to test NATO's response. So far, when I stepped out of here, we have not heard of concrete measures potentially from NATO to respond to this. Or the UK Defence Minister did say they would be instructing UK forces to look at ways of bolstering Poland's air defences. But a real moment of test here, certainly for the White House as well. I should remind everybody on Sunday, when asked after her pretty horrific record assault against Kiev, President Trump was asked if he was ready for the next wave of sanctions against Russia. He said he was. He said he talked to Vladimir Putin very soon. He said, indeed, the European leaders will be going to DC to talk with him about that. None of that has happened now on Wednesday, and he said those visits would occur by Tuesday. So a lot of questions now as to Trump's response, whether there will be a unified NATO response, including the US, to this extraordinary, unprecedented violation of Poland's airspace. I should point out there are many concerned that this may just be the beginning, that Russia may be trying to test and see what pushback it gets from NATO from trying something like this, and then may again try to violate Poland or other Eastern NATO members' airspace. And indeed, I should also point out to everybody that this was part, it seems, these drones launched as part of another substantial attack against Ukraine. 400 drones launched that same night. The fact that some of them strayed into NATO airspace, a remarkable sense that the Kremlin feels buoyed, feels potentially after the summit in Tianjin that it had at the beginning of this month, that it has increased support from China and possibly India, and certainly what we've seen over the past 48 hours, with 24 pensioners killed in a single strike in Donetsk by a Russian aerial bomb, Moscow upping its aggression rather than the opposite.
Thanks, Nick.
Download the app and get 50% off your first Wonder order with code 50Google.
Come on.
Exceed every expectation in the new 2026 Infiniti QX60 from King's Infiniti. Designed with distinction, the QX60.
Many thanks to Nick Walsh for that report. Let's get some more perspective on this. Let's bring in the former US ambassador to Poland and Sweden, Mark Brzezinski. It's a pleasure to have you on this show. Certainly the perfect person to talk to about all of this. So here's the thing. Russia is saying this was an accident. Most experts believe that this was possibly intentional to some degree. We know that Article 4 was triggered. That triggers consultations, but not necessarily a military reaction. When it comes to NATO's response, given that Vladimir Putin only seems to understand the language of aggression, what is the right response by NATO here, do you think?
It's hard to avoid the conclusion that there is a degree of mission creep on Putin's part as he continuously spreads this conflict to the West. And you remember that for President Joe Biden, the worry about expanding the war was the fundamental worry. And it looks, frankly, like President Putin, step by step, is doing that. It's hard to believe that 19 incursions, multiple drone attacks on Poland last night were a quote accident. In 2022, when I was ambassador here in Poland, and 2 Polish citizens were killed by an errant missile that came in from the east, the Kremlin was the first to the podium to say that this was an accident. It was not from them. It was an accident deployed by the Ukrainians. This time, the Russians did not exactly deny that they were behind this. And so, this is a step-by-step escalation at a time when President Trump, and I applaud him for doing this, when President Trump is trying to bring the Russians and Ukrainians together, it looks like Putin is simply not keeping his word and, creating a context in which peace and a ceasefire can be found.
So, Ambassador, given everything you just laid out, how fine is the line now between deterrence and escalation at this point? NATO members seem to agree that this is Vladimir Putin testing the resolve of NATO allies. But with that response now from NATO also comes a significant risk.
Well, look, these are, armed drones coming into NATO territory. Thank goodness no one was hurt or killed in Poland yesterday, because Poland is a NATO alliance member, and it would have triggered Article 5, in which technically an attack on one is an attack on all, and the response would have been technical as well. We don't want this horrific conflict in Ukraine, which has claimed over 1 million casualties, to spread, but that's precisely what these incursions can trigger. And so I think it's important to answer the previous question that NATO make an extremely clarified response to Putin, that this was not okay, that there will be consequences, and those consequences aren't just threats, that they happen now in the form of sanctions, in the form of some kind of joint cooperation between the NATO countries to create bulwarks against drone attacks and drone incursions from Russia. Something should be done to visibly convey to Putin that there will be consequences when these things happen, and this is step one of those.
Is this the kind of thing that will at least trigger a greater increase in European defense spending at the very least?
That's a great question, and I think even a couple of weeks ago, after the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska, there was a focusing of the minds among European leadership that Ukraine is not just an American problem, it's actually a European problem, and the Europeans are going to have to cooperate, develop a security strategy, and begin to deploy resources, meaning money, to pay for security and ultimately the rebuilding of Ukraine. I think this will what happened last night in Poland, a NATO-backed country, an EU country, will further concentrate the minds of the Europeans. That the Europeans will have to collectively engage on this and develop probably a European unified response to address this. But I'm hopeful, based on what happened the last couple of weeks, that the European leaders are up for it.
Is this not, though, Ambassador, Putin once again thumbing his nose at President Trump specifically? It was the president who had just welcomed the Prime Minister last week at the White House. And you also now have Europeans, rightly so, expressing alarm. Will that message only be delivered to Vladimir Putin now as sharply as you say it should, if it comes from President Trump, though?
My worry is that President Putin isn't really interested in peace, frankly. My worry is that he's a KGB agent who has resolve. He does not want to be seen by his people and by himself as losing to a fellow Slavic country, and that he will continue the war despite horrific casualty numbers already, because he wants all of Ukraine and maybe even to destabilize the eastern part of NATO that used to be within the former Soviet bloc. When the former Soviet bloc broke up, 26 countries emerged, as you know. Some of them have joined the West very successfully, and some have stumbled along. And what we have now is Putin attacking the weaker ones, but turning greater attention, per the incursion in Poland last night, to the more successful former Warsaw Pact countries that are part of the West, maybe in an effort to try to destabilize them.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the olive leaf extract before we have World War III. Olive leaf extract will focus on two main systems, your immune system and your cardiovascular system. By taking olive leaf extract, it's going to lower inflammation, lower pro-inflammatory cytokines. That's going to help with your immune system, and that's also going to help your vascular system by reducing stress at the vascular level. Olive leaf extract also helps to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. That means less plaque buildup. So please go to my store, get the olive leaf extract. It's dual purpose, helps with your immune system and your cardiovascular system.
It's a little unpopular.
Well, the mission is over, and so is the 30-day period here. There appears to be no appetite in Congress to extend this. It would take an act of Congress and some form of legislation. The Speaker says he doesn't want to do that. But Muriel Bowser, the mayor of the city, is in a peculiar position here, and she says that she'll continue to work with the White House. What's this going to look like months from now?
Well, I think collaboration is always a good thing. We want to see people working together, and that includes with the president. I think governors also would welcome working in tandem with the president. I think the difference here is the president's taking all of this action without collaborating and working together with folks, state and local leaders who know the places best. And I think that is really what's proved unpopular. I think state and local leaders know exactly what they need to keep people safe, know what kind of resources are necessary. And I think the way he's been deploying the National Guard is kind of gone against that.
Well, it looks like we're going to be going somewhere, Rick, and we might find out today. The president told reporters last evening he's finalizing negotiations with a Republican-run state instead of going to Illinois. A lot of folks think that might be Louisiana, where we would find New Orleans, of course, for a crackdown. The Attorney General, Pam Bondi, told Fox News last night they are a progressive city, referring to Chicago, and they don't want the president's help. That's on them. So we're going to a city who wants us there. What's going to happen next year with Donald Trump following the D.C. experiment, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's as you described. We'll wait and see. I doubt if it's going to be too much of a surprise. I know the governor of Louisiana has been actually soliciting the president. Please come down here. I mean, bring your troops. We'll have a day old time. We'll go to Commander's Palace. Maybe Donald Trump will dine out one more time. And yet, yeah, I mean, look, the experiment worked in D.C., right? Muriel Bowser, I think, is the one to watch here, not Donald Trump. She actually figured out how to handle Donald Trump coming in, you know, and sort of mowing down the standards under which we thought the government was going to interact with the D.C. Community, and now it's over. I mean, ostensibly, the speaker said we're out of here. No more reason to have an emergency. And in a Republican administration in a state like Louisiana, these troops who are America's best should be welcomed with open arms, and hopefully they'll have a nice impact on the New Orleans crime scene or anywhere else they go, right? And I think that the Bowers are an example of not making it, you know, a battle line in politics is a much better approach to dealing with what is a very, very intrusive federal government.
Yeah, I wonder if the National Guard troops we're seeing right now patrolling the streets of Washington will still be there tomorrow. We'll have to wait and see how this unfolds. A lot of them have been spending time picking at trash and directing traffic from what we've seen. By the way, Brendan and I agree. If the president's going to New Orleans, he's got to go to Friday lunch at Galatoire's. This has really become a very hungry program. Ophira, if it's not Illinois, you're, of course, coming to us from your perch at the Democratic Governors Association. Is this a huge win for J.B. Pritzker? Is this another model of how to approach Donald Trump?
Well, I think J.B. Pritzker used his voice and platform to do what he said, which was protect the people of Illinois. And I would remind people watching at home, the commander-in-chief of the National Guard is the governor, not the president of the United States, which is why I keep harping on this. If Governor Pritzker saw the need to deploy the National Guard in Illinois, I think that's one thing. But he was very clear that he in no way made that request and did not want that from the president. And so I think, yeah, victory for him. And frankly, I think the president of the United States should continue respecting the authority of all governors and how they choose to utilize the National Guard.
Yeah, you wonder, Rick, if we could get to a position where you've got a governor with his National Guard standing off against troops that the president sent into a state. The different cities, or any city, is different than Washington, D.C. when it comes to this. Then again, we saw what happened in L.A. So how would that direct the president from choosing the next spot to deploy these troops?
Well, I think Ophira's right. I mean, I think you want to respect the governor's rights. And, you know, it's nice to be on a program with a Democrat who thinks states' rights are a big issue. I think that they are too. And I applaud that approach. And again, I think that the last thing you want to do, and maybe the Pritzker example is the way to go, but it didn't work for California. And Gavin Newsom basically took the same approach. Don't come here. These are my troops. And he got pulled over and he lost in court. And So rather than fight that fight, I think Donald Trump, who wants to use crime as an issue politically, right? That's what this is all about. And he's found a mechanism to do that with government resources that ultimately he can control. And I think that Democrats have to find a better way than to just look like they're getting in this trap on crime again, where it's like, no, we're fine here, in Chicago, where 54 gun violations were counted last weekend. Nobody's going to buy that at the ballot box. So don't give Donald Trump too much room on crime, because he's going to take it, and he's taking it right now.
We'll announce it probably tomorrow, he said, when he came out of Joe's Stone Crab last night. We're working it out with the governor of a certain state that would love us to be there. It's New Orleans, right? Is that what you're expecting?
You know better than me, Joe.
Yeah. Well, if you've got a red state in the city with a crime issue, it seems like that might be the one. As Rick mentioned, the governor of Louisiana has actually been asking for it. That's the path of least resistance, it seems to me, if we're going to keep doing this.
Right, and I remember there was CNN reporting about this, that there are several cities in red states that have higher crime rates than Washington, D.C., where maybe this approach would be welcomed.
Does that give the president credibility to go into a city in a red state or a city with a Republican mayor and make a stand here?
Well, again, I think this is up to local leaders. So if the governor of Louisiana says he'd like to work with the president in this manner, great. But I would also go back to what Rich said. Governor Newsom was actually successful in court suing President Trump over his deployment of the National Guard into California. I think the court system did agree with him that that was an overreach.
It's a really interesting conversation. Porfiria Haskell and Rick Davis will be back in our second hour with a lot more to talk about with our.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost has 68 nutrients, very comprehensive profile. Read the label on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. This will target multiple systems. It's going to target your heart and your vascular system. It'll help with brain function, musculature, rev up your metabolism, and increase energy levels. And long-term usage of this, you're going to notice that you're aging slower. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and take this every day. This will also help to control your A1C levels. And heirloom barley. Heirloom barley helps to detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals through superoxide dismutase. By detoxifying your body regularly, you're helping your organ systems, your immune system, your endocrine system, even your brain. Because by reducing inflammation at the cerebral level, you are maintaining the myelin sheath of your neurons. Super important, trust me. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. You can stack it with the Boomer Boost. That's a powerful stack. You can also stack Boomer Boost with Gladiator barley. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Now, what I want to do is I want to play DW News about France's parliament.
Thursday night football returns. Commanders, Packers at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on Prime.
How do we pay for all this?
It's an Aldi thing.
Oh, yeah.
French Prime Minister Francois Bayrou has lost a vote of confidence in Parliament. The result brings his 9 months in office to an end, plunging France into fresh political turmoil. Legislators voted 364 to 194 to remove him. Most had opposed his plans for deep public spending cuts to rein in debt. He's expected to resign early tomorrow. President Emmanuel Macron will need to find a successor to become France's 5th prime minister in the last 2 years. Let's look at this with Jacob Ross. He's a research fellow at the German Council on Foreign Relations with a focus on France. He joins us from southern Germany. Welcome to DW. Is this a crisis, or is this just how modern French politics works now?
No, this is certainly a new episode of a political crisis that has been haunting France at least since 2022, when Emmanuel Macron, after winning a second mandate and the presidential election, lost the legislative election and lost his majority in parliament. He then last year went on to dissolve the National Assembly, lost further mandates with his party in parliament, and by whose ousting today, the loss of this vote of confidence is another episode of this longer-lasting political crisis in France.
So what happens now that Prime Minister number 4 has gone?
Well, apparently Emmanuel Macron will do everything he can to find a new prime minister rather quickly. The Élysée communicated this evening that in the next couple of days talks will be held with potential candidates. There had been speculations these past days already on these potential candidates spanning from the center-left Socialist Party, Parti Socialiste, to the platform that supports Bayrous' government or supported his government and is close to Macron. Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu has been named as one of the potential candidates to be nominated by President Macron. And if the president will not be successful in these next days to find a successor for ousted Prime Minister Bayrou, he might go on to dissolve the National Assembly again in hope to have clearer majority outcomes in the National Assembly.
Okay, but we presume that to be the nuclear option, do we? Or do you think that that's really likely?
Well, I mean, many people have been speculating about this nuclear option just because Macron pulled this last year already. He could do it again. The constitution gives him that right clearly. And it is really unclear tonight what a new prime minister could really do, since the majority situation will not have changed in the National Assembly. The new prime minister won't have a stable majority to vote a budget for next year. He will have to introduce measures to cut the budget in face of the French debt. And so this nuclear option could be a viable option very soon again for the president.
Who stands to benefit from this chaos?
Well, that's a good question that many in France and especially the voters are asking themselves increasingly. Political parties on the extremes, both on the left extreme and the right extreme of the National Assembly and the political spectrum in France, are likely to profit most from this, again, news episode of this political crisis. The far left, La France Insoumise, or representatives of this party have already called for President Macron himself to resign, since they see him at the center of this crisis, being responsible for it really. And the far right is apparently already preparing for new elections, no matter if they come in the next days or before the end of the year, when another newly designated prime minister might fall again in the National Assembly.
Okay, thanks for talking us through that, Jacob. Jacob Ross from the German Council on Foreign Relations.
Before we continue with DW, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 is super important because it's a gene expression cofactor, so it helps your cells to perform properly. It also absorbs calcium, and it will help you to get rid of cells that need to go into apoptosis, especially if they're infected. You really need this in the fall and the winter. So please go to my store and get the vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 also stacks well with vitamin K2, MK7 molecule. Why? Because when you take them together, you're going to be able to absorb calcium. When you do resistance training, you're going to be building bone matrix, so you don't get osteopenia or osteoporosis. Super important. And if you take higher doses of vitamin D3 and do light resistance training on joints that are problematic for osteoarthritis, you can actually reverse it within about 7 to 9 months. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the K2 and the D3, and guess what? It will also help to pull out some of the calcium depositing around plaque formation and reduce plaque formation. So it helps with your cardiovascular health. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the vitamin D3 and the K2 together. You're gonna need it. Get it for the fall and the winter, trust me. Or don't pay attention and don't be surprised if something bad happens to you in the fall and winter.
Let's get more on this from journalist
There's a reason Chevy is called the heartbeat of America. It's in the pulse of those who never stop getting the job done, or the party started. This summer, Chevy.
Let's get more on this from journalist Cole Stanler in Marseille. Welcome back to DW, Cole. Given the terrible state of French finances, why did Francois Bayrou's plans to overhaul the budget meet with so much opposition?
Well, I think, for one, before we get into it, there is some debate over just how urgent that problem is. France does have a high debt to GDP ratio. It does have budget deficits. But there's debate over just how urgent it is to rein those in through a massive austerity plan, essentially what Bayroux was proposing. So there's some debate over how urgent these kind of spending cuts are. I think that's the first point.
Now think about it. What if another pandemic happens? What if there was a world war? What if there's a major economic crisis? That would mean that the ECB would have to be printing money, and that would be inflationary. And the bond, and what would happen is that as inflation becomes a problematic, bond yields will continue to go up. There will be more debt at the countrywide level because there's fiscal policy, that fiscal stimulus that's going to be happening. So they're going to have to pay more on their interest. So they don't have any shock absorber. Would you drive a car down a road without a shock absorber? Probably not. Now, if you have a country that is over indebted, has political crises, and the economy is relatively healthy. But what happens if there's a Lehman crash, a Lehman type event that takes place, or a severe recession? Like a dot-com, remember the dot-com bubble? It's coming. It's called the AI bubble. Believe me, it's coming, all right? It always does. Whenever you look at the history of building out new infrastructure coupled with new types of derivative markets like private debt and private equity derivatives, when you couple those together, guess what will happen? A crash. It'll happen. Now, if you're prepared for it, you have a little bit of cash on hand and you're going to wait for it. Boom, boom, wait, and then buy in. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow. Actually, the stock market's going to go up more before the bubble. I'd be a little trepid at about 7,500 on the S&P 500. But you have to wait and see what's happening. But there will be an AI bubble that bursts. That's definitely going to happen. What about what's happening on the Eastern Front in Europe? NATO might be activated with Article 5. What happens if there is further conflict in the Middle East? Or even worse, what happens if China tries to take Taiwan? You think the markets are going to be stable? Probably not. So that would mean that more fiscal policy is going to have to be pumped into the system in Europe, and the ECB is going to have to bail out and print more money. There's no shock absorber. So when they're doing all this, it's going to add more debt. And it'll make it even worse. So there is no choice. You have to do it now. If you don't, it's only going to be worse when the crisis comes.
Or distressed people say, look, the French interest rates on French debt is still lower than the U.S., still lower than the U.K. So that's the first part. But it really comes down to what those measures look like, right? in a kind of abstract sense, you can talk about reining in public spending, but what Behu was proposing, over 40 billion euros, in budget cuts. These were cuts basically to hospitals. It was a full-year freeze on welfare and pension benefits, freeze in state spending, and then perhaps most controversially, actually removing 2 public holidays. So all this made it sort of a political non-starter for much of the French political spectrum. We saw that reflected in the vote today. You have both the far right, which has a real chunk of working class voters supporting her, and of course also the left, which is opposed to this sort of kind of austerity on principle. So it was really a political non-starter.
Mr. Bayrou's successor will become France's 5th Prime Minister in 2 years. Unions are calling for a national general strike, and there's this Block Everything movement with as many, it's reported, as 100,000 people thought to be getting ready to come out on the streets. Has France become ungovernable?
Yes.
Well, I think we're in the midst of a very serious political crisis. I think that's a tougher question, but we have a real political crisis here that there's not an easy way out. Okay, so right now Emmanuel Macron could, in theory, name another prime minister. We've already seen now, as you mentioned, a couple of attempts to sort of have right-wing prime ministers that are close to his party, that are essentially relying on the National Rally as kingmaker in the National Assembly. So do we have another, now third try the same strategy of having a right-wing prime minister? Macron has said he'll name one in the coming days. Or do we maybe go to the left? That's another.
At Granger, we're for the ones who pay attention to every little detail. The ones who fuss, tinker, and sweat the small stuff. Because the tiniest thing can make the biggest.
Or do we maybe go to the left? That's another possibility. But then, to your question, if it seems like none of these proposals are workable, if you can't have a prime minister that can amass even a relative majority in today's hyper-divided French National Assembly, well then you start to have this question of you need to go to new elections. And then that's something that's becoming more and more on people's minds. And frankly, people are talking more and more openly about, do we have to have new elections like the one that Macron called for last year? And I think also to understand some of the kind of frustration, the anger at the president right now, there's a sense that Macron himself is the architect of this crisis. Remember, we have to go back to the decision to call for these snap elections in the first place last year, those snap elections that resulted in this extremely divided National Assembly. He didn't have to do that. And so you have extremely divided National Assembly and a sense among voters that their will wasn't really being respected at the polls with these prime ministers. So we have a deep political crisis. I don't know if France is ungovernable yet, but we're sort of ticking down the box, ticking down the list of different options here. If there's no prime minister available, dissolution, snap elections, that becomes a real possibility. And then the final card, which is definitely not on the table right now in a serious way, is should Macron have to resign? And that's what you have some kind of calls on the far left for that to happen. Polls show a lot of French people want him to resign. That's off the table for now, but the more France is in this political crisis, the more people are starting to think about these sort of out-of-box, unprecedented, seemingly unimaginable solutions.
And you do see this as a crisis. This is not just the way French politics is conducted in the modern age.
No, absolutely not. One of we're in what a lot of people in France are calling a regime crisis of the French Fifth Republic, which has this very strong executive. France is not accustomed to parliamentary politics like Germany, like Italy. France has this very strong president, and Macron has this authority to dissolve the assembly, to use executive decrees. He has this broad authority, but the problem is right now there's a sense that he's extremely isolated, and that maybe the system ultimately isn't built for a country that, I think that's the real question here, a system that concentrates so much power in the hands of an individual, the president, is not built for a country where you have three broadly divided political camps that are not accustomed to compromise like you have in Germany, where parties are accustomed to working with one another. Today in the French National Assembly, the far right, the left bloc, and the Macronist bloc are not very interested in working together. And so how do you fix that with a very strong president? So these are the kind of regime questions that are becoming on the table here.
Let's quickly zoom out then to look at what's going on in French society. Tell us more about this Block Everything movement, which is hoping to bring the country to a standstill in a couple of days.
So maybe people recall the Yellow Vest movement, which was this kind of spontaneous movement that began over a proposed hiking the fuel tax in late 2018. So what's interesting about this movement, the Block Everything movement that's slated to take place on Wednesday, the 10th, is that it has some of those similar, has a similar feel in a lot of respects to the Yellow Vest movement. It started online, but so outside the sort of institutional actors in France, outside political parties, outside labor unions. And what's happened now is you've had a number of parties on the left say they're supporting these strikes, these protests. Part of it is strikes, part of it may be simple protests outside of city halls. Some of it might be more radical actions, like trying to block the streets, disruptive. And you have some unions that are supporting it as well. September 10th is going to be a big test as well. How many people actually show up? It's hard to know because, again, this is happening outside the sort of institutional framework. When French unions call for mass strikes, you tend to have a kind of sense, even a couple of days before, how they're going to go. This is a lot of grassroots, online, kind of vague. So a lot of people are going to be looking closely at what happens. People don't quite know. We have another date for mass protests, September 18th. That one unions have called for, perhaps could be even bigger. The reports are suggesting that the government is even more concerned about those September 18th protests. So you have a lot of pent-up frustration. Again, it goes back to that question I was talking about, which is the democracy in France. How is it that a lot of people feel like you have a government that's imposing these austerity measures, imposing its will on a public that didn't want it, they didn't ask for it? And so that's part of this as well. It's a broader kind of democratic frustration that's connected to those kind of social economic issues that were part of the Yellow Vest. But it's kind of deep-seated frustration, and it's why a lot of people don't know how big this could be.
Good talking to you, Cole. Thanks for talking us through that. That's journalist Cole Stanley in
France is going to fall. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60. This is a very potent antioxidant. It will help to slow down the aging process, help with your immune system, help with your endocrine system, help with your vascular system, and your brain function. C60, you can get it in extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, or MCT coconut oil. It has to be in an oil for proper absorption. Take a teaspoon a day, preferably on an empty stomach, but take it every day, and it's going to soak up free radicals, help with the health of your mitochondria. You're going to have more energy. Your cells are going to perform better. It's going to soak up free radicals at the vascular level, so there's less plaque buildup. It'll help with your immune system and your endocrine system and your brain function, because it'll help the health of the mitochondria in your neuron. The neurotransmitters will be produced. You'll have better connections between neurons. The health of the neuron will have less stress, and the myelin sheath will have integrity. Those are all very important for faster cognition and better memory. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take the C60 every day, a teaspoon a day. I've been taking C60 every day since 2016. And what you're going to notice is that your body is performing better. Within about 2 months, you're going to notice that. And within a year, visually, you're going to notice that you are aging slower, especially when you do the holistic approach. Proper diet and exercise, resistance training, cardio, stretching and balancing, drink filtered water, stay away from processed foods, stay away from sugary foods, learn new things, talk to people, write, read. Don't have too much connection with social media. Don't doom scroll. Have an active life. And when you do these, proper meditation or mindfulness, spirituality, all of these are very positive for slowing down the aging process. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take the supplements, stack them the way I've been telling you to stack them, and apply a holistic approach to your life, and you will slow down the aging process. So please go to my store and get the C60. This is a very potent antioxidant. It is hundreds of times, if not 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. So please go to my store and get the C60. Very potent, and it works, and stick with it and take it every day, teaspoon a day. That's the end of the program for today. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.